Good morning, everyone. I'm Belle Groves and I'm a carer advisor, chair of the Dual Diagnosis, Consumer and Care Advisory Council, amongst other roles.
And hi folks, I'm Bronwyn Williams. I'm the Eastern Mental Health Service Coordination Alliance Coordinator, and we call the Alliance Emska. We welcome you all to the 2021 Emska Navigation Forum entitled Professionals Navigating the East with Carers. This is our first completely carer-focused event aimed at supporting health and community service staff to effectively work with carers. As an online forum, there are bound to be some technical difficulties for some of you. If you have any questions at all, please email Brad Every for support, and you can see for tech support up on the screen now, there's a Discord link.
On behalf of the presenters of this webinar today, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet virtually today. For me and my team, that is the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. We pay respect to the Aboriginal elders past, present and emerging, and to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us online today. We welcome and celebrate diversity at Emska as we reflect the variety and cultures and communities we serve. Our Alliance strives for true collaborative practice and spirit of inclusion for all. Emska recognises that poorer health outcomes are associated with experiences of discrimination and marginalisation. We challenge inequality in the development and delivery of health and community services. Emska recognises those individuals and their supporters who have a lived experience of mental ill health and the important contribution that they make to the development and delivery of health and community services. We are now very privileged to have Julie Coombs provide a welcome to country. Julie is a proud Wurundjeri woman who is a passionate and active advocate for Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal women, children's rights and welfare.
Thank you, Belle, and thank you for that beautiful acknowledgement. Firstly, I'd like to thank Bronwyn for inviting myself here this morning to perform the Welcome to Country. It's a privilege. Just before my welcome to country, I'm going to talk a little bit about Corranderk. So Wmrinchka, welcome everyone. And I'm going to share some of my culture, history, your history about Corranderk Station, which is one of 8 stations. Missions, reserves and stations were areas where Aboriginal people were placed in after being forcibly removed from their traditional lands. The reserves and missions had strict rules regarding what Aboriginal people could and could not do. Aboriginal people were not allowed to speak language or continue traditions and ceremonies, and were punished if they were seen doing these things. As a result, a lot of language, culture and traditions were taken from us. Corranderk is a very significant place to me, as this is where my grandmother and great-grandmother and many of my ancestors were born. My grandmother Dolly was born under a tree at Corranderk, and my great-grandmother delivered my grandmother. There were happy times at Corranderk, however, a lot of times were sad too. Funded in 1863 on 2,000 hectares of fertile mountain country in Victorian Yarra Valley. The Kulin clans who established the Corranderk Aboriginal Station in 1863 were true survivors. Mid-1864, there were around 70 people living at Corranderk. Corranderk was established on the traditional land of the Wurundjeri people who roamed the upper and lower reaches of the Burrarong River, attracting people from across the... Corranderk was quickly hailed a success, both among non-Aboriginal and Aboriginal people, believing the station would remain a permanent protectorate, a homeland where Aboriginal people could avoid the deprivations of disease and frontier Corranderk. Corranderk was named after the Christmas bush that grew along the reserve. Wurundjeri people take their name from the word rum, meaning manigum, which is common along the Burrarung, and juri, a grub that was found in the tree. By the mid-1870s, Corranderk had become a large village with a schoolhouse, bakery and butcher. There were now around 150 people living out at Corranderk. The Merry Creek at Corranderk provided the Wurundjeri people with an abundance of food, such as eel, fish and duck. Women were responsible for 90% of the food collected, of which the staple were plants. The growing community's hard work and dedication had made Corranderk a highly productive farm and a valuable piece of land. Neighbouring farmers wanted the mission closed as the land was now deemed too valuable for Aboriginal people. The community also cleared and worked the land and produced and sold cloaks, baskets, boomerangs and other artefacts. And most of all, prize-winning hops produced from the farm won first prize at the Melbourne International Exhibition in 1881. Corranderk became a tourist attraction of the Upper Yarra. It was almost the most photographed Aboriginal community in Australia during the 19th century. In the 1870s, when officials threatened to close Corranderk and sell off its rich grazing land, Wurundjeri elder William Barrick led the first Corranderk rebellion, marching with residents into Melbourne to claim ownership of the land he called my father's country. The Aboriginal Protection Board argued that it was in the community's own interest to be moved. The community fought hard to protect its land. However, the board provided no resources for Corranderk's upkeep during this time. Living conditions, as you could imagine, subsequently deteriorated and illness swept through the community. Then the ultimate destruction of Corranderk was the so-called Half-Caste Act. The board made a ruling that all able-bodied half-caste with fair skin like mine under the age of 35 years should be told to look out for employment or seek settlement elsewhere. In 1886, as a result of this act, around 60 residents were ejected from Corranderk on the eve of the 1890 Depression. Their forced departure crippled Corranderk as an enterprise, with only around 15 able-bodied men left to work the successful hop gardens. The reserve was formally closed in 1924 and most residents moved to Lake Tyers Mission. 5 older people refused to move and continued living at Corranderk until they passed away. The last known Aboriginal woman to live at Corranderk was Auntie Lizzie Davies, who died in 1956, aged 104. She was denied permission to be buried at Corranderk, along with her husband and siblings. In conclusion, I just want to say sovereignty has never been ceded. It always was and always will be Aboriginal land. We recognise the past atrocities against Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples of this land, and that Australia was founded on the genocide and dispossession of First Nation people. Thank you for listening to my story about Corranderk. I will now do my welcome to country. I welcome you to my country, the land of my ancestors, the traditional owners of this land on which we meet. As is customary of Aboriginal Australians, I acknowledge and pay respect to our elders, past, present and emerging. I would like to acknowledge all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here this morning and your families. I'd also like to acknowledge everyone here this morning. Indeed, to do a welcome to country is indeed a privilege for me. I never thought I'd see the day when I would be in this position to perform a welcome to country, a tradition that has been handed down by my mother and her ancestors before her. My mother also handed down this possum skin cloak, which I am very honoured to wear this morning. The importance of a welcome to country is that it acknowledges the Wurundjeri as the traditional and rightful owners of this country on which Melbourne stands and beyond. My people belong to the Kulin Nation, which is made up of 5 important tribes, the Wurrung, Dja-Dja-Wurrung, Tanarong, Wathaurong and Bunurong. The significance of a welcome to country not only allows for respect to be paid to the traditional owners of this land, but also to you as guests of the Wurundjeri. Being a guest comes with a number of obligations such as respect, acknowledgement and caring and sharing. By following these obligations, we can only move forward to making Australia a better place for us all, also for any future generations, regardless of our many nationalities, cultures and traditions. Strong spirit, strong culture and strong people will mean a strong nation. For us Aboriginal people, the land has a spiritual connection. It's our mother. The human spirit is born from the land and returns to it upon death. The land supplies us with everything we need for living and healing. In conclusion, on behalf of my elders, Vmch, Wurundjeri, Balakim and Kundi Big, Nugugin, thank you and stay safe.
Thank you, Julie, for your wonderful welcome to country.
Thank you and have a beautiful morning, and I hope everyone, shares their knowledge and everyone can learn from each other. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, folks. Yes, thank you, Julie. That was really beautiful. A lovely welcome to country.
Thank you, Bronwyn.
And I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. You'll notice that there's a Q&A tab in Slido, and we want you to use this to ask questions of all our presenters at any time during the event. You may also like questions posed by other participants, and in this way we can prioritise the questions to be answered by presenters. We also have some polls for you in today's forum, so just go to the polls tab to participate now, and the more people that participate, the merrier. So our first poll is designed to help everyone know who is in the room today. So I just want you to pull that up for yourselves now. And Brad's going to pop that up on the screen for us. So please answer in a word, which health or community service sector do you represent today? Terrific. Okay, we can see quite a few responses there. So it looks like the majority of people are coming from mental health services today. We do have some people from dual diagnosis. We've got a good portion of people from disability employment services, AOD mental health, which is what we call dual diagnosis. We've got them here too. Adult education, local council, some private practice, disability and carer, addictions. So the AOD sector is represented in different words on the screen. A bit of NDIS, some health, carers, case management, hospital social work, aged and disability. That's fantastic. Family services. I'm just letting people have time just to navigate to the polls. So there's a polls tab, and if you haven't noticed that in your Slido, just go to there and they should have a live poll ready for you. Terrific. Okay, so we're going to move to the next poll quickly. So in a word or two, how would you define the term carer? Just in a word or two, what would come to mind when you think of carer? Okay, someone said supporter. Extraordinary humans. Oh, I like that. Under-recognised. Looking after someone. Unconditional love. Valuable. Unpaid service provider. Support person. That's come up really strong. Priceless, selfless. So it's just so evident the value that we place on carers, and just keep adding words in, because this word cloud will be captured and it will be part of what we provide to you at the end of the event. So we just really want to capture the essence of how we see carers and how we value carers. Thanks so much for that. Okay. Belle.
The Emska Implementation Committee excuse me, is responsible for the development and delivery of all Emska events. Here is a list of those involved in providing this webinar today. We have also employed the services of Brad Every, live streaming services, to make this forum run smoothly and to manage the tech. Brad's details are in your workshop booklet.
Yes, you'll have received the workshop booklet by email, hopefully. And if you haven't, just drop me a line and I'll send you a copy. So the Emska Implementation Committee members are all part of this multi-level alliance that we call Emska. So here are the alliance partner logos, and you might see your logo on this slide. Emska aims to strengthen mental health and AOD service collaboration, coordination and system integration across inner and outer eastern Melbourne for improved consumer outcomes. And we've been doing this for more than a decade now. Our vision is for people who experience mental ill health and co-occurring concerns, and the people who support them, to access responsive, appropriate and collaborative services to assist with the multiple facets of their individual recovery journeys. Carers are a key focus at Emska. So now we're just going to move on from the previous Slido poll. So Brad, if you can just pop Slido back up. We've got another poll for you. And this poll is, how often do you work with carers and families? So daily or almost daily, weekly, monthly, not very often, or I don't work directly with carers and families. Just trying to capture some data on how the forum representatives here today are actually experiencing their carer population. So we've got quite a few little polls for you. And we want as many people as possible to get in and answer the polls. So it looks like most people are working with carers daily. There's a good portion, more than 60% of respondents so far. There's only a few people here in this forum that don't work with carers directly. It may be, though, that you're working in a more of a consultation role where you're actually supporting staff who work with carers. Terrific. Okay, it looks like people are starting to find the polling functions. Okay. So the next question that'll come up on your poll screen is, how confident are you working with carers and families? This is a bit of a pre-poll. Oh, by the way, all these polls are anonymous. So if you thought that you were getting captured in data with your name, it's not. It's just an anonymous poll. So please feel free to pop in there and put your answers in, because nobody will know who's answering it. Terrific. Okay, so thank you very much for answering that. It looks like most people have a reasonable level of confidence, but there's all of us feel that we've got plenty we can learn about how to work with carers. So hopefully today's forum will answer some of your questions and that you'll go away with a bunch of resources and a lot of confidence and also compassion for carers that you work with on a regular basis. Okay, thanks, Brad. We'll head back to the slides now and Belle's going to talk.
Emska aims to support a more coordinated response across our region. We want service users and their families to know that we are happy to be collaborative. So we developed this poster to display in waiting rooms across our region.
Thanks, Belle. Yeah, so this poster was developed with the Dual Diagnosis Consumer and Care Advisory Council and a range of other lived experience people in a co-design, co-production format. And this poster is now available for all area waiting rooms to help carers and consumers who are coming into various health and community services to ask for shared care, to be knowledgeable that this is something they should be receiving, a shared response from staff. So keeping carers at the centre with consumers is really important, and just being mindful of carers and families in all interactions, and particularly young carers. I think Michelle's going to talk a little bit about young carers later on today. Our next poll aims to capture your experience in this area, working with carers. So how constructive have your interactions with carers and families been in the past few months? Going back to Slido, Brad. Now, things might have changed in the last few months. That's why we're asking this question. It has been a really challenging time, and particularly across the last 18 months. But just wondering how you're finding the work with carers at the moment. A lot of people being locked down with their loved ones in a care relationship, and it can be quite challenging, more challenging than usual. Less respite opportunities, less opportunity to go away. A lot of people going in and out of hospital more routinely. So we're just wanting to capture that today. Terrific. Okay. And then one more poll for now. Also, with respect to the pandemic and its effects, how has your relationship with carers and families changed in the past 18 months? So have you had more contact? Have you not had as much contact? Have you noticed carers and families taking on more responsibility or more support roles? Have you found carers and families to be more valuable in your work, more important in the collateral journey together? You can actually select more than one, I think, in this poll. So it's great to see that nobody's noticed carers and families becoming less involved during the pandemic. And in fact, the majority of people are saying that they're taking on more of the support role than previously. So I guess this just demonstrates that this is a really timely opportunity for us to have this conversation about carers and the needs of carers going forward. Okay, so back to the slideshow, Brad. So the Mental Health Royal Commission has been a huge piece of work for our state government, and many of you will be well aware of the Royal Commission findings and recommendations. There are about 60,000 Victorians who care for someone living with mental illness. Families, carers and supporters can feel really excluded by the system, and they're often left out of engagement that would help them in their caring role. Many families, carers and supporters require but are unable to access dedicated supports in their own right. There's a widespread lack of access to information about treatment, care and support to assist families, carers and supporters. We can see from the findings that better connections and support for carers is one of the key objectives of the proposed reforms. Carers need to be part of the care team and included as a key source of information, as well as intrinsic to the support for their loved one going forward. Carers need us to communicate with them. So our next Slido question, right, is how do you support carers? So we've got some options here. Do you provide referrals to carer support services? Do you provide a carer support group? Do you provide individual support to carers and families? Include them in care team meetings, provide them with information, provide support options to young carers, and provide information to young carers. And just select all that apply here. Okay, so majority of folk are providing information. Some people are providing individuals, quite a lot of people are providing individual support and referrals. Fewer people working with young carers. That's probably an area that we really need to strengthen in our work across the board. I know that the FATMI team are doing a lot of work in that area. All right, terrific. Thank you for that. Moving right along. Belle.
Thank you, Bronwyn. And now we'll hear from a carer advisor about the challenges she experienced. Denise is a member of the Dual Diagnosis Consumer Care Advisory Council. Denise also provides dual diagnosis carer support to people who are inpatients at Eastern Health in a group setting. Denise's work is fueled by passion for system change, as she lost a son in 2015 due to his struggles with mental illness and substance use. Please welcome Denise.
Thank you. When we find out that our loved ones suffer from mental illness and addiction, we feel overwhelmed and unsure of what to do to help or how to cope with the situation. We reach out to organizations and others to help. In my experience, these places are often pushing the consumers toward treatment for either the mental illness.
Denise, it's very difficult to hear you. Is your microphone perhaps not working so well? Your headphones are interfering. Can you take them off?
Now?
Okay, try again. Yes, we can hear you. You can start again. That's fine.
Oh, sorry.
Much better.
Thank you. When we find out that our loved ones suffer from mental illness and addiction, we feel overwhelmed and unsure of what to do to help or how to cope with the situation. We reach out to organizations and others to help. In my experience, these places are often pushing the consumer towards treatment for either the mental illness or the addiction, without a holistic approach or recognizing that both need treatment.
You're interfering again. The headphones just started. You can take them. If you take them off, it might be easier. Take them out of the computer and go back to where you were from.
Now?
Yes,
Yeah.
good.
Okay. Better? Sorry.
Yes, much better.
Oh. When we find out that our loved ones suffer from mental illness and addiction, we feel overwhelmed and unsure of what to do to help or how to cope with the situation. We reach out to organizations and others to help. In my experience, these places are often pushing the consumer towards treatment for either the mental illness or the addiction, without a holistic approach or recognizing that both need treatment. In many circumstances, the addiction is ignored and the focus is only placed on the mental illness, treating only part of the problem. Upon admission to hospital, the carer feels like they are shoved aside, ignored, and made to feel like they are part of the problem, or have no insight into what treatment is needed. I come from cold community, and I have coped with judgment, negative judgment, discrimination, and blame from my own community. The blame that I didn't raise my son properly. And as a mother, I am responsible for my children's upbringing and behavior. On top of that, we cope the judgment and blame from nurses and clinicians, as it's not enough of the overwhelming and confusion by what is happening in my life. A carer, however, have seen the behavior that present in the individual in numerous settings outside the clinical setting and has a deeper awareness of the patterns and shifting behavior. Sometimes services refuse to share information and include the carer in the treatment plan and will discharge without consultation with the carer. The carer needs to know about the consumer's illness, mentally and physically, especially the side effect of any medications, so they know when to call the treating team if needed to prevent the person from relapsing. 9 July 2015, my son was admitted to the hospital by the police. The next morning, my son absconded from the ED. A couple of hours later, he returned to the hospital. For him to return, that means he's desperate and not coping. He absconded again after a couple of hours. In one day, he absconded twice. 2 days later, my son came home, very confused and suicidal. I made him breakfast. He took the food to his room. I called the police to take him back to the hospital. When they left, I called the triage and informed them that Samer was on his way to the hospital, feeling suicidal and mentally very disturbed. I begged them to put him in seclusion so he could not abscond again. They assured me he would be fine and not to worry. The police stayed with him for 3.5 hours. When the doctor came and told the police they can leave Samer in their care, as he was to be admitted to the ward, the police warned the doctor that the minute Damuni get alerted that we have left, he's going to abscond. They didn't listen to the police. Half an hour later, they called the police to report Samer absconded. On the 14th July 2015, the police came to my house to tell me my Samer took his life. I always argued that your diagnosis is not a choice, but an illness, and it needs to be treated like an illness. After I lost my son, I wasn't sure if I would still fit in the category of a carer. However, then I realized that my journey didn't finish with his death. It started on a different level. I am involved in many different forums and groups for carers and consumers within 2 different regions. I have tried to speak up at meetings and share my experience about caring for someone with your diagnosis and proper treatment for sufferers like my son. I will continue to share my experience to help others as they might find themselves in the same position, and to endeavor to have the collaboration between carers and practitioners improve. As carers and consumers, we need to be directly involved in the care and treatment of our loved ones, as we often know what's best for them and see how they react to different treatment. I've tried to explain my experience to many treating teams, managers, and ministers to no avail. I believe that there is a long way to go with the service and treatment of consumers suffering with dual diagnosis. I believe that the first step is to pay attention to what carers and family are saying, listen to their worries, their concern, and their advice about their loved one. I was made to believe that I was failing as a carer for my son. However, I soon realized that the mental health system failed to deliver proper treatment for him and my family. My vision for the future of mental health and addiction treatment is more involvement from the family in the treatment of their unwell loved one. I believe that holistic treatment of consumers will work better than either or treatment style that is currently being used. You cannot help a consumer with their addiction if they are using a particular substance because of mental illness. Working through the layers of those suffering from dual diagnosis and understanding them as a person will account for better results and improving the prolonged wellness. If treatment and services continue the way things are now, we are going to lose more consumers, people to suicide. We are going to have whole families losing faith in the system and more people not accessing the treatment and help they need due to prior failing of the system. The rate of homelessness will also increase as families often feel that they have no other choice but to kick their loved ones out for undesirable behavior. These families are unaware of the help and support that they can be offered. With the right treatment for their loved one, 20th of July 2015, that was the last time I viewed and kissed my Samir. That day, I made a promise to my son and myself that I will advocate on the behalf of carers and consumers to not let this mistreatment happen again. Work towards breaking the walls of stigma and discrimination when it comes to mental health issues and addiction, treating dual diagnosis with a holistic approach and taking into consideration what families and carers have to say will reduce the mistreatment and homelessness and the suicide. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise, for your heartfelt presentation. Our next speaker is Dave Neef, who is a carer consultant working at Maroondah Mental Health Inpatient Unit. Dave has 15 years experience working with families and consumers in clinical and community settings. He provides individual and family support based on his lived experience knowledge. While having studied psychology and counselling, Dave prefers to draw upon lived experience in order to stay authentic to peer work. Please welcome Dave.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Denise. I think I'm going to be, just confirming a lot of what you said in that heartfelt speech. So unfortunately, our mental health system is not perfect and still has a long way to go to providing the level of care and trauma-informed practice that we can do. It's improved a lot over the time that I've been working in it, but yeah, there's still definitely a long way to go. So I've been a carer for nearly 20 years for my wife who has schizoaffective disorder. So it's been quite a traumatic journey with lots of hospital admissions and quite high levels of stress on and off over those years. And I have to say that because I want to mention a bit about trauma-informed care as well today, as well as difficulty accessing supports. But we carry a lot of trauma in the background as families and carers, and we really need staff to be sensitive to that when we're approaching you for help. Otherwise, it's adding to the trauma, and we don't need that. there was a fairly recent admission to my wife in a health service that was very difficult for me, not just because she was very unwell, but the way that I was treated was wasn't really holistic, and it wasn't trauma informed at all. So I had another layer of trauma added by the way that I was approached and the way I was communicated with. I was pretty much only contacted for collateral information during the 6 weeks my wife was in hospital, and I was also contacted when it was required to do so under the Mental Health Act. And that was pretty much it. Nobody called me to see how I was going or to see if I was coping, either when I was at the hospital or back where I was staying. So I was pretty much just left alone and quite highly distressed. So nobody really made me feel welcome in that place at all. And it wasn't an Eastern Health facility, but still it was quite a shock because I expected better. I can remember one of the staff letting me out of the hospital after I witnessed a very disturbing event, and I'd asked, do you have any consoling words for me? Because it's pretty desperate, and she just said, no, just another day on the ward. And I opened the door and waited for me to leave. So it's kind of adding to trauma. So I just wanted to mention that around trauma-informed responses. Another thing that we need so that we can access supports and look after ourselves is carer education. We provide the bulk of mental health support in the community, so we should be adequately trained to do our task. We're left alone to provide high-level mental health care without the tools or resources to cope. So carer training should be part of a comprehensive and holistic approach to mental health care. It's something Denise had mentioned previously. Educated and supported families can help keep their loved one well, reducing the burden on healthcare systems. They also take better care of themselves and can better sustain long-term caring roles. For mental health clinicians have years of experience and training behind them. So how do you expect us to provide the bulk of that care at home without any support and training? We need to know, Denise mentioned this as well, we need to know about early warning signs, early warning relapse signs, so we can get help early. We need to know about medications and side effects, good communication skills. We need to know how to talk to people, our loved ones, while they're unwell, and what helps and what doesn't help. We need help overcoming guilt, setting boundaries with self-care, coping with grief and loss, detachment and letting go, how much to be involved and how much to step back. This is a big skill set that's needed desperately by families who are looking after someone with a mental illness. And without these skills and without this support, we don't know how to access what we need. Family supports are lacking and hard to navigate. So it's good to access supports, but there needs to be supports to access, and there really is quite limited support for carers. And it's very difficult to know where they are and how to find them. Our losses due to mental health have been, financial losses have been huge. We've lost a full-time wage for 20 years. 150,000 or more in other care costs. And I've also prevented multiple admissions to hospital, which would have been very expensive for our government, the taxpayer. But yeah, in light of that, I receive $60 a week in care allowance. So we're basically unpaid mental health workers. Yeah, so we also feel, very disempowered by an intimidating and kind of fragmented, confusing mental health system. Sometimes we're not made to feel welcome, but rather a burden to time for health staff. What we need is reassurance, good communication, in the sense that people care. We're often not recognised, validated, or accepted as important in treatment. Yeah, so please take time to gently explain to us what's happening so we feel welcomed, included, and feel that you care. Then we can feel our loved ones in safe hands as well. Yeah, just briefly, the other reason we don't access supports is because we don't see ourselves as a carer. Sometimes we're not in a traditional care role, and it's hard to know when we're a carer and when we're not a carer, because the mental health is episodic and changes. So it's difficult to know you're a carer, and if you're not told you're a carer, you won't access supports for carers. So sometimes we need to tell families that they are in a care role, so they actively and help them actively look for support. So yeah. So in summary, just accessing support requires people to be well informed and educated. It requires us to feel empowered, to know what we need and how to get it. This gives families the best hope for the future. Also, please always practice trauma-informed care, as families often carry significant trauma already. Do not compound it. Make us feel welcome and part of the care process. Remember how important the simple things are. A welcoming smile, a brief phone call, a kind look. These things are easy to do, but make an immeasurable impact. Roman, how are we going for time?
You're fine. We'll hand over to Belle now if you like. Thanks, heaps, Dave.
Okay.
Thank you, Dave, for sharing the challenges and trauma of being a carer for a loved one. As we reflect on the challenges for carers, our next topic explores the issues of trauma, as was expressed by both Denise and Dave just now. We welcome Jen Thompson. Jen has over 30 years' experience of leadership in the not-for-profit sector. Jen has extensive experience in counselling, management, and program director roles. Her true north has always been to encourage our innate human ability to be braver, kinder, and wiser. In the Eastern region, Jewel worked collaboratively to reduce stigma associated with mental illness and substance use concerns, and was one of the founding members of the original Eastern Dual Diagnosis Consumer Carer Advisory Council. Jen now works in private practice with a focus on mentoring, coaching, and supervision of health professionals, managers, and leaders. Please welcome Jen.
Thanks very much, Belle. Such a pleasure to be with you. Hopefully you can see these slides. I'd first like to, as Julie has so aptly pointed out, that we meet today on stolen land, the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. And so I would like to pay my respects to our First Nations people and any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander community members with us today. Obviously, this is also a topic of interest and importance to the Aboriginal community internationally. And as David and Julie and Denise have all shared, I noticed in my own body the impact as I heard stories of distress and challenge. And so before we begin, as we're looking at this topic of the window of tolerance, we're actually getting to know our own anatomy, and we're getting in touch with our own body. So I'm going to ask you to just feel your feet on the floor and feel your body supported by the chair beneath you, and to place your left hand on your heart and your right hand on your belly. And just for a moment, if you're comfortable to close your eyes, just focus your attention on your breath and just check in with your body. Is there nervous energy? Is there a sense of calm? Or perhaps you feel a little numb. So just checking in, just noticing the breath. And with each breath in, breathing in calm. And with each breath out, blowing out the air like you would through a straw. So breathing in calm. And exhaling stress. We're just going to take a couple more breaths, dropping the shoulders, noticing the micro muscles of your eyes and around your face, just relaxing your body and focusing on the breath. And if you are feeling a little numb, I invite you to just tap your feet from left to right, just moving your body. And one last breath. Now I invite you just to give your hands a shake. So just feeling how you are in your body and what it's like to find that central place of calm, what we call the rest and digest window of tolerance. So I'm not actually talking about trauma-informed care particularly, but I really appreciated, Dave, your comment about the importance of trauma-informed care, which is all about creating safety, physical safety, psychological safety, because we know that when we have experienced trauma, and everyone in this room has experienced some form of traumatic event in our life, but when we become a traumatized nervous system, it's when there is an overflow or an overload, and our bucket of vulnerability overflows to the point that we're actually unable to find our window of tolerance again, that place of calmness and rest and digest. So I'd like to offer a definition of trauma that I particularly like from Stephen Porges, which is that trauma is a chronic disruption of connectedness. And for our clients and for our carers, where there is trauma, where there is an overflow of the nervous system, it makes it incredibly difficult to maintain connection with ourselves, to know what we think and feel, and to maintain connection with others. So this is quite a radical statement, the myth of self-regulation. You might have heard a lot about the importance of self-regulation, but in the context of the window of tolerance, I want to suggest that we were made to co-regulate. And Bruce Perry, if you are familiar with the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study and the ACE score, he is saying that really a person's history, whilst we know that if there is adverse experiences and trauma in our life, we do have more likelihood of mental illness and substance use. But Bruce Perry reminds us that it's the person's history of connectedness that determines our health and our overcoming of adversity. So this is incredibly important when we're thinking about carers, the role that carers play in relation to you understanding the client, but also the importance that we each play in co-regulating another human being who is distressed, and the importance of compassion, the importance of really appreciating the power we have as a human to connect with another human and to actually calm their dysregulation. So why are we talking about trauma at a carers forum? Well, I think having heard the stories already, we know that trauma is the elephant in the room. And Peter Levine, who is an incredible father of somatic treatment for trauma, really focusing on working with the body, he has said that trauma is the most avoided, ignored, denied, misunderstood, and untreated cause of human suffering. And I would agree with that. Having worked in the substance use sector for decades now, seeing that every human I met had some experience of trauma that led to their substance use. And so to understand this person in context. And the other thing I love about this quote from Peter is that he also reminds us that human beings are born with an innate capacity to triumph over trauma. And we are able to process and develop genuine transformation of our trauma. So we're here to talk about the window of tolerance, and you may have heard of this term. It came from Dan Siegel, the child psychologist. He first coined this term. But most of us in our everyday life, we have the ups and downs of life where our own body has and mind has an intelligence of bringing ourselves back to a regulated state, a grounded, present, flexible and reasonable state of mind. But when we have experienced trauma, or when we experience a threat or even a perceived threat, this nervous system fluctuation can actually move outside of the window of tolerance. So it can move up to a hyper-aroused or fight-flight response where we have over energy, our energy goes up, we have anxious thoughts, we're unable to concentrate, we become unable to relax, we have far too much energy in the nervous system. All our nervous system moves down to hypo-arousal or the freeze response. And when we're in that state, we have a sense of exhaustion. We have a sense of numbness. Our body shuts down. There's depression and a sense of disconnection. And so understanding this window of tolerance and where we get to the edges and where we move to understanding our own anatomy really helps us as workers, if we're working with clients and carers, to know our own nervous system and to keep our own nervous system in the window of tolerance is incredibly important, because nervous systems talk to nervous systems. And you know that if you're in the presence of someone who is calm and you're hyper-aroused, that in a very short space of time, that person is able to calm you, that you're able to, if there's welcome and compassion, validation, you're able to regulate again. So this is what we call co-regulation. We all have our trauma stories, and I'd like to suggest that trauma is not a mental injury. So what we know now from neuroscience is that we have one whole system, our brain and our brainstem is connected to this vagus nerve, which we're going to hear a little more about, the wandering nerve that actually connects to our muscles, to our major organs, to our digestive organs, our heart, our lungs, and our bowels. And so we know that when our body is in distress, it impacts every part of our body. Our heart rate increases, our digestive system impacts. So if you're familiar with the ACE study, where there was 17,000 people in the general population, middle class people, who were followed as a result of their trauma, and there was a direct correlation with chronic illness and early death. And we can see why, when there's trauma trapped in the body, it's actually influencing the health of our whole body. So Dan Siegel, who termed this term the window of tolerance, has an incredible little video if you Google Dan Siegel and the handy brain. And he helps us understand the brain by showing us our brain through the hand. And this is our brain. It sort of sits behind our forehead like this. Our fingernails represent the prefrontal cortex, which is our CEO, executive functioning, our logic and our reason. But when we get distressed, we have a message coming up the spinal cord, which hits our amygdala, represented by our thumb, which is what we call the smoke alarm of our nervous system. And it anticipates threat. When we feel threatened, our limbic system gets activated, our amygdala gets activated, and we literally lose connection with our reasoning and our logic. We no longer have an integrated brain. So all that we have available to us is fight, flight, or freeze. And it's amazing that our body has been made in this way. So our body has intelligence. It's there to support us, there to protect us from threat. But it can often get into that stuck on threatened state through perceived threat. And this is a real example of where our prefrontal cortex goes offline, our amygdala, what we call the amygdala hijack, where people think that toilet paper in a global pandemic is essential to our survival. There's no logic in this. There's no reason in this. There's no empathy. And I actually saw this in my local supermarket, where my own community of very caring people fought with each other over toilet paper. It's a real example of the evolution of our primitive brain that anticipates a threat and loses its logic and reason and gets into a hyper-aroused state. So this is the brain in a traumatized state. Our window of tolerance, a traumatic event happens. So we think of the global pandemic, for example. We all are living with the unpredictability of our circumstances. And so our nervous system is particularly wired to look for threat or notice threat. Now, for some people in the COVID situation, their nervous system has gone under the window of tolerance to a depressed state. Can't be bothered getting out of bed, can't be bothered eating, feeling dissociated, losing that energy. So the energy is low. And for others, their nervous system has gone and stuck on a hyper-aroused state where there is anxiety and panic and rigid thinking, a need to control. And this is where hostility and rage comes from. So where there is aggression, wherever we see aggression, it is anxiety. Wherever we see aggression, it is anxiety. It is someone in a hyper-aroused state. And this is very important when we're working with family members who are hostile. And they're hostile because they feel out of control. They're needing us to actually reassure, to provide information, to include them, to bring compassion, so that they're actually able to then come down to a regulated window of tolerance. And this is what I mean by the myth of self-regulation. Really, it's quite challenging to regulate yourself when you're in a hyper-aroused or hypo-aroused state. You really do need the support of another human being to help you co-regulate. So Stephen Porges, who really brought to us this understanding of the nervous system, showed us that our nervous system actually interprets the environment without engaging the brain. Our body actually scans the environment through the nervous system, and it chooses one of three paths. It interprets the outside environment and the inside environment of our body, and it decides when we're breathing in that calm space that we did all together with the breath, we were in that safe, calm, rest and digest window of tolerance where we're actually able to connect with another person, maintain eye contact, and that's possible when we feel safe. But if our nervous system thinks that there is actually a threat and there's danger, we move into the hyper-aroused state, and our heart races, and even our perspiration begins. So our whole body begins to think that we need to prepare for danger. But if we think that there's nothing we can do, if our nervous system determines it's no point running, it's no point fighting, this is a hopeless situation, our nervous system, and keep in mind, this is all happening without our thoughts, without engagement of our brain. This is our nervous system deciding which branch it will take. So if we've had a lot of trauma in our life, we may actually go straight to life threat and hypo-arousal, which is our heart rate decreases, we become depressed. This is called the dorsal vagal system, where there's a freeze and collapse. So depression, dissociation, dissociative disorders, that chronic fatigue, all of those conditions are the nervous system in hypo-arousal. So hyper-arousal, too much energy, anger, hostility, raised voices. This is the nervous system in a hyper-aroused state. It's outside of the window of tolerance. When we're in the window of tolerance, we're able to maintain eye contact. Our posture, our body language is open, relaxed, and we're able to connect. When we're in a hypo-aroused state, our nervous system has chosen to actually shut down, and our nervous system has done that because it believes there is no hope. There is no point taking any action, running, fighting. The only way to survive is to shut down, and there's too little arousal. So to know what your nervous system does, to know your own nervous system, I know for me, I can get into a hyper-aroused state. I did that this morning when I couldn't work my clicker in the practice run. But generally speaking, my nervous system, what I know is it will tend to, shut down, become a lot more withdrawn and retreating. So I know that in order to take care of my nervous system and to keep myself in window of tolerance, I need to keep movement and engagement up. So whenever someone is outside of their window of tolerance, we need to regulate, because you can't reason. Just like the toilet paper fiasco, we can't reason when our prefrontal cortex is offline. We can't have a logical, reasonable conversation. What needs to happen first and foremost is safety, compassion, care, validation, reassurance, information, and calming the body so that it can actually engage again to its thoughts and feelings. So this is a great slide of our anatomy. The green represents our window of tolerance when we're in ventral vagal, that pathway where we actually feel calm. And it really, it's interesting how much of that is in our facial expressions, where we show our smiles, our eye contacts, our throat, our voice, our heart, our lungs. The yellow is our sympathetic nervous system, or the hyper-aroused. So you can see those nerve branches are predominantly in our arms and legs to help us run and fight. So how amazing that our body is made in this way, to understand our own nervous system, that it's actually made to help us run and fight and survive. And then the red branches of the nervous system here, you can see that it's from the top of the brain, our facial features and our digestive system, our lungs and heart, so major organs, our muscle tone, our temperature, our immune response, our heart rate and blood pressure all decreases. Now, when someone is in an extreme hypo-aroused state, they can actually be in a coma. And Peter Levine is working with people in coma and treating it as a traumatic response and bringing people out of coma by interpreting this body reaction as actually a shutdown of the nervous system. So there's some fascinating science happening as people are understanding our nervous system. This is a great photograph that really helps you see the window of tolerance. We're able to communicate and connect. When we're in hyperarousal, it's fight or flight. And when we're in hypoarousal, it's freeze and shut down. So there's a blankness in our appearance, that we become trance-like. There's long pauses between communication, and people feel far away. So I've mentioned the word co-regulation. This is a beautiful story of twins who were in respective incubators, and one of the twins was deemed not to survive. It wasn't going to live. And a hospital nurse fought against them remaining separate and argued to place them together. And what happened was the healthy baby immediately threw its arm around its sister, and the baby that was deemed not to survive, actually its temperature rose to normal, it stabilised, and it actually survived and thrived. This is another wonderful image of co-regulation, where we actually appreciate that the person in distress needs someone to meet them exactly where they are. And especially when we have a position of power, to actually be aware that it's around creating psychological safety as much as physical safety for the person. So here we have, again, another image of the window of tolerance, appreciating that the causes of moving out of the window of tolerance may actually be unconscious thoughts. It could be a smell, a memory, seeing something that triggers a traumatic event or memory in our physiology, and that could be enough to tip us into a hyper or hypo-aroused state. So some ideas to stay in the window of tolerance. Well, mindful breathing is the most effective, miraculous strategy we have to keep our nervous system in the window of tolerance. And I guess I'm suggesting this for every human, whether you're a carer, a client, a staff member, whoever you are, whatever your role is, to know your own nervous system, to know how to keep yourself in the window of tolerance, to be able to anchor yourself in the breath and in your body so that you are an embodied human being to another person. The other great ways to stay in ventral vagal or window of tolerance is play, connecting with people, tai chi, qigong, dancing, walking in nature, ideally walking with another person, listening to music, having a playlist of songs that calm your nervous system or that lift your nervous system. So if you're in a hypo-aroused state, you're not going to need relaxation. you're going to need something that uplifts you and supports your nervous system to actually feel lighter. Aromatherapy, smells can be very useful in getting us back into the window of tolerance. Bubble blowing. Now, as I look at all of these things, what I'm mindful of talking to carers and people who are working with carers is the importance of respite. I mean, these things, when you're looking, you're the prime carer for your loved one. How do you get to go dancing? How do you get to take a Tai Chi class or walk in nature? It's very difficult if there's inadequate respite or inadequate support for you to actually get that break. So the window of tolerance really helps us appreciate how important it is for every one of us, every human in this current context of COVID, as well as caring for a loved one with a mental health or substance abuse issue, to be able to bring our own nervous system to that place of calm, rest and digest. And this is really critical because it impacts our long-term health outcomes. It impacts our risk of diabetes and heart disease. If we are in a dysregulated state and that is our norm, that is going to have an impact on our physical well-being and our general health. Just one last note is a new book out by Kristin Neff called Fierce Self-Compassion. In order to take care of ourselves, in order to reach out to others for help and to regulate our own nervous systems, we need to have a basic sense of, I am worth it. I am going to care for myself. I am going to practice self-compassion. And Kristin Neff's recent book called Fierce Self-Compassion, what I love about it is self-compassion is not just about tenderness and kindness and, you know, bubble baths and doing nice things for ourselves. It's also about learning how to have assertive communication, how to set boundaries, how to say no, how to reserve our own energy, how to get a backbone, as well as, you know, be able to care and have compassion. So the concept from Brené Brown is strong back, soft front. And I think this is such a helpful metaphor when we're thinking about taking care of our own nervous system and also being aware of what others need, particularly carers, what support carers need in order to practice self-compassion is the energy of both tenderness as well as fierceness, the ability to say no and to set limits for themselves. So what does your nervous system need to stay in that calm space? I guess understanding the nervous system and understanding the window of tolerance is a really helpful way of just checking in with ourselves. Who can I co-regulate with? What is it that keeps me grounded, safe and connected? And how can I take charge of my own nervous system, practice self-compassion, love my own anatomy and look for ways of supporting myself in this life, which is incredibly challenging for all of us, but particularly challenging for carers at this time. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you, Belle.
Thanks, Jen. I'm going to pop in there because we've got a few questions for you, Jen. I'll just get Brad to pop the Slido questions up for us now. Just make sure it's in the right mode for Q&A. Here we go. Now, remember, folks, if you haven't put a question into the Q&A, you're welcome to do so now in the Slido. Additionally, if you like someone's question, please just put a like on it so we can see where the priorities are for answering the questions. And we really appreciate that. We'll be doing that for each speaker going forward for the rest of the session today. So, Jen, I just love the reminder that we should meet people exactly where they're at today. And I think that's a good reminder for all of us and even for ourselves to be mindful of where we're at and meet ourselves in that place. Beautiful session, and I really appreciate it. I'm sure everybody would echo that that was just so needed for all of us. So the first question today, how do you recommend we work with someone whose nervous system has shut down?
So keeping in mind that this means that this person feels that their response is in response to a life-death situation. So we really need to go very gently and slowly if someone is in a hypo-aroused state. But it is about getting into the here and now, because a hypo-aroused state is a dissociated state. It's a disconnected state with themselves. So walking, movement, going for a walk with them, depending on what your role is, it actually having movement. So obviously my role as a therapist working with someone in shutdown, I might very gently suggest some movement, either walking and talking, blowing a bubble wand, exploring the breath, bringing them into the breath and the here and now, noticing what they see around them, noticing smells and sounds. So bringing awareness to the here and now in the room. Because they're in a shutdown state, they're disconnected, and movement is really important.
And you were mentioning before about aromatherapy, obviously having some smell in the room. Is that a good way to?
It's so always checking with the person, because obviously these days there's lots of sensitivities, but things like peppermint, if someone's in a hypo-aroused state, they might want to drop a couple of drops of peppermint in their shower in the morning, just to bring an uplifting smell. You know, if you're someone who in COVID is really struggling with low energy, low mood, it's thinking about aromatherapy that lifts you up. So peppermint is a really good one that has very few reactions, so people tend to not react. But I guess it's always checking with the client. If you're thinking about your client, the client is always in the driver's seat. So it's checking always very tentatively, would it be helpful to you if we tried this, or offering suggestions and really following their lead, because their body has its own intelligence. Their body and mind will tell you what it needs, and we are not the expert of their body and mind, they are. So it's always checking, throwing out ideas and seeing what lands for the person.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jen. How can a worker manage their own arousal in a session when they're hearing stories from carers that trigger that state of arousal?
Yeah, so really important question, to actually bring attention. So as much as you're focused on the other person, you want to equally bring your attention to your own body, noticing your feet on the floor, noticing your breath, because often in that situation we might hold our breath, or you might notice that your breath is getting faster. So really bringing attention to your own internal world, slowing your breath down so that you're actually able to be a safe container for the other person, and also lowering the bar for yourself, because often what gets in the way is that we feel we need to fix the other person, or we feel we need to intervene, when actually the most important thing we can do is hold the space and be a witness, a safe container. So looking at that photograph of the policeman and the little boy, it's just meeting that person where they're at and keeping our own nervous system in that window of tolerance.
Terrific. Yeah. I think it can be quite challenging when you are hearing something that's triggering in a session, that you don't escape yourself while you're actually trying to attend.
Yeah. So noticing what's going on for you as much as what you're hearing from the other, and bringing, if you notice that your thoughts are starting to ruminate, to bring yourself back to the breath, anchoring yourself back to the breath and your body in the chair. So feet on the floor. So really enabling yourself to be anchored in your body and not away in your thoughts, and regulating, your own internal world as best you can.
Thanks, Jen. Excellent. I've got a couple more for you because we have got a good amount of time today. So how can carers manage their fear of losing a loved one? What would you do to help someone who's chronically frightened of losing a loved one?
Yeah. And this is really, a very challenging situation, because people that we care for are often taking risks, or we know that there's risk-taking behaviour, and it's reaching out for support. So thinking about the co-regulation, reaching out for professional support to support you in your anxious thoughts, and also recognising that there are limits to what we can do to protect another person, knowing that we can do all that we can, and then there are risks outside of that where we can't actually always be there for that person or always protect them, and reassuring ourselves through conversation with a professional or a friend. So making sure that we have that co-regulation when we are having those anxious thoughts. There's a lot of things that you can do to support yourself through, there's sleep apps and calming meditations and other things out there now that you can use to calm yourself when you're having those anxious thoughts. But the fear of losing a loved one is real, and certainly what you would be noticing is the hyper arousal of your nervous system as you entertain the thoughts that you may not be able to protect them, you may not be able to always keep them safe.
Okay, thanks, Jen. We're going to move to the next question. How do we meet someone at where they're at when they may pose a risk to us or others?
Yeah, so our job, I guess, is to be a calm presence. And when someone is dysregulated, things escalate often because we become fearful. And so if there was a specific situation, I could talk to that, but I'll talk to this generally, that obviously the physical safety of everyone is important, and that's your first priority. And whilst anger is always anxiety, it's also one letter short of danger. So, we have to really think about, is this situation warranting me to take particular action to keep myself or others safe? Obviously, keeping ourselves safe is the first priority, putting the oxygen mask on yourself first, but thinking about, if there is a genuine risk, that we have to attend to that risk and take action. So we're not going to hold the space and be an anchor for someone if there's a genuine, real risk going on. If it is that someone is aggressive, or there's anger, often we think that there's a threat when actually they're really needing us to calm and regulate. So I'm trying to think of all the different scenarios that question might be referring to.
That's a really good answer, Jen. And I was just thinking, in my own experience, when someone's really hostile or aggressive, oftentimes if we calm ourselves and we become peaceful within ourselves, that they seem to de-escalate. If we become anxious in the moment, and it's natural to become anxious, it can be much more triggering for them to become more hostile. So it's often about our self-regulation as well, which is tricky in those situations.
Definitely. And it's abnormal to actually calm ourselves in a situation when someone is really dysregulated and hostile. We're actually going against our own evolution to, calm ourselves and reassure ourselves that we don't have to become anxious. But often that is what escalates situations. It turns a code blue into a code grey when we're actually escalating through becoming frightened of someone's behaviour. And I think the first step is doing what we can to diffuse and calm and reassure by our tone of voice. Keeping a calm tone of voice, slowing our breath down. We know that humans, our nervous systems talk to each other, and if someone's dysregulated, a calm voice and a slow breath can often be all it takes to help the person calm. But obviously there's exceptions to that with psychosis and people on ice, or, you know, there's exceptions where we have to then respond and follow our gut feeling.
And take a giant step backwards. Create space. Very important, actually, create space, because if that person is fearful, what often happens, people come into the space and that also escalates the situation. So definitely creating space, staying calm. Yeah. Excellent. Good stuff. Now, I just think this might be a comment. It seems to be there's less tolerance now, especially with COVID. I imagine they're talking about tolerance of each other, or...
Definitely. So if we think of that first slide of what is trauma and the bucket of vulnerability and the overflow, like, I think for all of us, our nervous systems are activated and on edge because life is unpredictable. We don't like that. We like predictable life. We like to know that we can plan and control our environment as best we can. So we're in a situation where our nervous system would be more activated, but also there's fatigue because, you know, we've sort of taken 2 steps forward and 1 step back, and you know, there is genuine fatigue. I think the online work, it also is fatiguing. So, you know, there's some very real fatigue in our physicality, and looking after ourselves is really important. Yeah,
being fatigued can really make it difficult to be tolerant.
Definitely.
Last question, Jen, because we're just about out of time. Family carers cannot escape if they tend to live in crisis. Are there any answers to who they should contact to co-regulate?
Look, I think every carer and every human should have a resilience plan. I have a resilience plan. I use it with my clients. I use it with the people I supervise. It's essentially a safety plan. I don't call it that because it is about having a strength-based lens, which is around resilience, but really sitting down and noting who are the people I can call when I'm distressed. It doesn't have to be a crisis, but actually having a plan for what are the things I can do, what are the things that help me calm myself, to really know your own nervous system, because we do have our own signature that we have to get to know. And then really having a plan of action. What would I do in this situation, and having those numbers available to call. And thanks, I can send you that template. You've probably got it, but, you know, a resilience plan with a really clear, thought out plan of action of what we do to support ourselves when we're distressed is important.
Jen, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you with us today. Thank you so much for your time. And we're going to move on now, and I'm going to pass it back to Belle.
Thank you, Jen, for showing how connectedness and compassion can provide healing towards the carer, and for your question and answer segment. Thank you. Carers need care too, but this is not often occurring. Today we have invited Amanda, Danielle and Nev from Villa Maria Catholic Homes to speak about their carer support services and the importance of self-care. Amanda is the Support for Carers Program Carer Engagement Officer. Danielle is the Case Manager with this program, and Ev is a carer who has experienced this support. You can learn more about all of our speakers in your event booklet provided via email.
Thanks, Danielle. And Amanda?
Hi there. So I'll just start by telling you about where we're from. The Support for Carers program is a Victorian state government program, and Vmch deliver it in the Eastern Metro region. We'll start today by briefly covering some commonly experienced issues for carers, because it's important to keep these in mind when working with carers, and also to demonstrate why carers are a client group for whom self-care is of the utmost importance. We'll then talk about how our Support for Carers program aims to promote carers' self-care, and hear from our wonderful lived experience carer, Ev. So many carers experience fear of the future.
Carers can hold fears that can be a significant mental burden and really difficult to cope with. Many carers fear what will happen to their loved one once they're gone or when they're unable to provide the care anymore. The fear of what will happen if their care recipient's disability or condition worsens can be really terrifying and challenge their ability to cope. Relationship and role changes. A recent example from our program was where one of our carers' care recipient used to handle all of the computer and technology side of things before he became unwell. And once he was unable to undertake those tasks anymore, and once we started going into lockdowns, the carer became really isolated. So we provided her with an iPad and technology training so that she can now keep on top of the emails, she can FaceTime her family interstate, and she can attend our carer engagement support groups and activities online. Family conflict is a big one. Caring tends to put additional strain on relationships. It's a really common issue for many of the people that we support, and it's extremely distressing and upsetting for them. Behaviour and personality changes of the care recipient can be really upsetting, confusing, and frightening, or even place carers at increased risk to their emotional and physical safety. Can also mean that the carer may not be able to find the support and reciprocity that they once did with the person that they care for. Emotional impact is a huge issue. While it's important to remember carers report many positive aspects of caring, like companionship, feeling fulfilled, the enjoyment of it, the satisfaction, research does show, which is also reflected in our work with carers, that carers are at increased risk of depression, anxiety, feeling burdened, anger, resentment, worry. Their sleep can be very disrupted, and they can even have suicidal thoughts. So this tells us as service providers, we need to support their emotional needs, such as supporting a sense of comfort, a sense of belonging, empathizing and understanding, and reassuring them in times of distress. Loss and grief is a really difficult issue for carers to deal with. This can relate to situations of palliative care and end-of-life care. And I can definitely impart to you as a former palliative carer that preemptive grief is a really heavy and difficult mental burden to be carrying around. Grief and loss can also relate to the relationship changes and behaviour changes mentioned previously. Sometimes those changes can be permanent, which can be really difficult to adjust to. There's also physical stress. This can have several facets. For example, a caring role might be physically demanding and place the carer at a high risk of injury. Research does suggest that carers do tend to neglect their own health. The carer, due to exhaustion or limited time, may find it difficult to incorporate health promoting activities into their lifestyle. The emotional impacts and excessive stress carers can face can result in physical manifestations of that stress. Some common complaints are headaches, stomach aches, muscle pain and tightness, and joint pain. Financial stresses are very common. Carers have lower than average employment rates and also lower rates of full-time employment. And concurrent to this, many carers experience additional expenses associated with their role. Disability treatments, medicines, and equipment can be prohibitively expensive for families, particularly with lower incomes. Navigating service systems can be quite the nightmare for carers. It could be an entire forum in itself. But to give a recent example, I met with a group of carers recently, and two of them had their care recipients' NDIS funding slashed in half at the latest review. They were losing vital supports and now have to spend many further hours preparing for an internal review, which isn't ideal for people who are already stressed and time poor. It's also important to mention that culturally and linguistically diverse people are additionally impacted by this issue. The fact that culturally and linguistically diverse people account for around 9.5% of NDIS participants at the moment really reflects this. And another issue is just not knowing what services are out there, where they are, and what they can do to support carers. So issues commonly faced by carers can be numerous and overwhelming, which places this demographic in great need of self-care to offset the many stresses impacting their well-being. So the Support for Carers program supports carer self-care through short-term case management, which is Danielle's role, and ongoing carer engagement, which is my role. So Danielle, could I please hand over to you to discuss how case managers promote self-care for carers?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Danielle, one of the short-term case managers with the program. And often in case management, we see carers enter the program feeling overwhelmed and exhausted due to the ongoing and dedicated support that they provide. At this point, it can be hard for carers to reflect or even identify what they might need for themselves. A large part of our role is to work closely with a carer to understand how they're feeling in their care role and the challenges they might be struggling with. We then discuss some of the supports and how they can work for them in their care role. This can look very different for each carer with their individual situation. From this discussion, we can identify supports that might work to assist the carer in providing them with some space and time for themselves and to reduce any burden. These supports are flexible and they can be applied directly to the carer or used indirectly to support the person they care for. This helps us to provide a variety of ways which we can incorporate supports to meet the needs for the carer. Through these supported experiences, it can provide valuable opportunities for carers to take time outside of the care role. For a lot of carers, this may be the first time they've had an opportunity to exit the home alone or complete a simple task uninterrupted, or even just to stop, have a cup of tea and not be consumed about the caring role. Successful experiences assist carers to build and develop more opportunities for reflection and help carers to place value on their needs while also being a carer. These can provide pivotal changes that help to sustain the ongoing support carers provide. The value of the program is that carers remain supported through their entire caring journey. We walk alongside the carers, providing many different opportunities for them to meet their own needs and support them to build their networks so they don't feel isolated in their care roles. We acknowledge and celebrate the carers in the significant role they provide caring for another person. Thanks, Amanda.
I might ask Ev to unmute now and we can hear about our the most important bit, the carer lived experience. Ev, are you okay to start?
Yes, thank you. Hello.
Can you please tell us about yourself and who you care for?
Okay, well, I became a sole carer for my son about 7 years ago. He was diagnosed with autism and some other labels at around the age of 4. He also started noticing, he was way behind his peers when he was, progressing in age to about 11. And this was the start. From then, it was the start of, my carer's role. Although I struggled between being mother and carer, it was very difficult, especially watching his journey and everybody who responded to him. So then I became confused with the mother and carer's role. But I also became so immersed in it that I became withdrawn. I lost a lot of friends, and I also lost many other things, such as, you know, work. I could go on with that one. But probably most of all, my sense of self. And nobody seemed to, you know, every time, you know, nobody sort of seemed to understand those daily challenges that I was facing each day. So that, you know, sort of might give you a bit of an idea of who I am and I care for.
And can you tell us a bit about how you linked in with carer support?
Well, it was very difficult, actually. I engaged over the years. I actually, you know, reached out to a number of supports, not just for myself, but I initially reached out for my son's independence in his support services. And once again, because I was so immersed in it, I became more depleted and more depleted over that time. And, you know, I was kind of, every time I'd reach out for something, you know, I'd not just reach out, I'd cry out and say, I'm struggling here. You know, I'm having problems to even engage into the world. But I was always reminded that I wasn't the client. My son's the client. I wasn't the client. So it was like I was disregarded or discluded, or and then, of course, in your own brain, you think, oh, so I don't matter. Okay, all right, so he's the client. I don't matter. All right, so let's go on. Let's plow on. But it was actually, you know, that inner self sort of keeps crying out. And one of my son's support workers actually, you know, because I'd sort of say little things to them, and they actually heard of the Vmch, and they actually said, you know, why don't you try and contact them? So from there, I sought out to contact you guys. Thank goodness. Thank you. So that's how I was able to engage, and find that pathway. But it wasn't easy for me to do that.
And how would you describe your self-care at that time?
At that time, it was like, there really wasn't any self-care, because the whole focus was on, you know, the client as such, my son. And my self-care, over the years, I put him first, not just as a mother, but also as a carer. And I think all carers do that. They put themselves, so they don't even think of themselves. I think they just think of that role as, we've got to help this individual that isn't able, and yet you seem to be able, but you're not. You know, you're only a human being as well. By the time I actually reached out for help, I'd completely lost sight of myself. I also was living in a very high-risk living situation, and that was faced on a daily basis. I had to make choices, although I had to make choices in a mind clouded by, you know, lack of sleep, fear, all of the things, human things that come with that. I virtually ended up living out of my car, although I still proceeded to do the carer's role and the carer's duties. But that's to the extent to where my self-care was, living out of my car, basically, and trying to find ways to survive as a carer and also sustain a car roof over my head. So my life basically became like a robot. You know, I lost all sense of the fact that I even mattered. I felt sort of that worthlessness. And it seemed strange because those around me also more or less reinforced that, which is, it seems strange to think, although people, oh, you're doing a good job, you're doing a good job. But their words, they were words. There was no direction. So basically that's, that was the sort of state of care that I had for myself at that particular stage.
Mm. And I'm just keeping an eye on the time, so I might skip one question and go on to asking you about how you and Danielle work together to build self-care into your life.
Danielle, absolutely, was amazing. When I connected with Danielle, it was like she'd said words to me that I had never, ever heard before. It was like magic to me, really. Danielle, she listened to my journey and she understood with, no judgment. She opened up her ears, her words, and everything that she expressed. She even expressed back to me, instead of, just the pat on the back and say, oh, you're doing a good job. She actually opened out the fact in everything she said, that I mattered and that I was a human being, that I was valued for who I actually was and am. And she also helped me realise that the carer's role, how big the carer's role was. Because you get in such a robotic state that you even lose that sense of what, although you're doing a carer's role, you lose that sense of I don't even know a word to explain it. But Danielle was absolutely amazing. We, we went through, Danielle asked me, what were my needs, and how can we move forward, and what can we do, and in each time she offered different ways and different pathways, and also she allowed me to discuss that with her I felt comfortable to discuss that without the fear of that judgment because of our prior talk. So she guided me and equipped me with skills, gave me a pathway. We made a plan together, and we made a plan where I felt comfortable at my pace, and which felt like a hug, by the way, a hug to me that I did. And also she constantly does check up on me, not intrusively, but she doesn't just leave me. She's checked up on me at each process, and she's been so thoughtful and respectful towards the whole situation. It was she gave me permission to move forward and to know that I actually needed that care and that I was valued. I mattered.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. I would love to keep chatting with you more, but I do need to keep an eye on the time. And
Yes.
when I believe we have some questions to answer.
Yeah, we sure do. Hey, thanks, folks. That was a fantastic presentation, hearing from the three of you. And Ev, just emphasising the importance of meeting the basic needs of carers. And also just hearing from you about how the support from Danielle made you feel valued and you were validated in your role as a carer and how big that role is. And also just that practical support, once again, it's so essential. Questions. Is there support within Vmch for carers of people with a dual diagnosis? So people with mental health and AOD. Amanda, perhaps.
Well, this is actually one of Danielle's areas of expertise. So
okay.
to her, but we do, yeah.
Danielle, did you want to speak to that one?
Yeah, look, we welcome any carers, and given the dual diagnosis situation, there is a lot of, can be a lot of challenges for carers. So I'm really happy to work with them and flesh out how we can make things a little bit better for them.
Fantastic. Thanks for that. The next question is, how do carers engage with the case management at Vmch?
I can answer that. So you come through an intake process where just demographic details are taken. Then every person that enters the program has short-term case management. So we just establish some goals with a carer. And once those goals are met, then they transition to a monitoring process where we check in with them.
Yep.
Like I said before, once you're connected to the program, you remain connected with us for the entire journey of your caring role. So even once that expires, we still hold you for a few more months just to make sure you transition into what other journey you're going into.
Fantastic. And we've included the link to your organisation, I think, in the booklet. But so just getting in touch with VMCH online, even that would be one way, Danielle.
Yep, definitely.
So how would you support a carer navigating mental health? This is a really big question. We might have to get a written response at some point. Mental health, AOD, justice, corrections, because these sectors historically don't acknowledge the role of carers.
Okay. Our program is short-term. We do have limited funding because of the short-term sort of surrounding that. So what we would do is make sure we could be seen as like a connector. So making sure all of those parties are meeting together to reduce that stress for the carer, making sure there's collaborative communication across all of those sectors. Yeah. So that, to tightly fix that question.
So making warm referrals and connecting people. Yeah. Thank you so much for your time today, all three, Amanda, Danielle and Ev, and particularly Ev for your brave delivery of your lived experience. It's always the most interesting presentation when we hear from people with real experience. So thank you so much for your time. Now we're just going to go back to the Slido polls briefly. We've got our last Slido poll before the break. And this poll, let's just get it up on the screen here. The question was, in a word or two, what are your key challenges when working with carers and families? And we can see loads of people have already logged in and popped some responses in, but if you've got any more for us, please do. So we can see confidentiality is a big one. And I know lots of people struggle with, can I share information with a carer? Can I talk with a carer? And we would refer you then to the Mental Health Act if you're working with someone with mental illness that states that we do need to talk to carers. Carers can have plenty of time with staff around their needs, and also we need to keep them informed, and we need to make sure that carers know what's going on for their loved one. Even if the loved one doesn't consent, that it's fine to tell a carer. A carer is living with that person often in many circumstances. So they really do need to know when that person's being discharged. They need to know what's going on. And they often need a bit of psychoeducation and advice to support them in their caring role. And we heard that beautifully delivered by Denise and Dave today. Time and resources, often staff feel really pressured and that they really feel there's little time left for the carer. Communication comes into confidentiality. Who to refer to, that can be challenging. So today we're going to cover that for you. Identifying carers' needs, agency barriers in general, being too busy, the budget. I'm not know what that's quite referring to. And maybe that's about a budget to support carers better, and carer resources more broadly. So thanks for that. You can keep answering the poll, that's fine. I'm just going to now go to a break. We're having a 10-minute break with Elf Moncrief, who's delivering a beautiful mindfulness meditation for us. So you can go off and get a cup of tea or coffee and have a quick break. But if you are staying in the Slido, please enjoy Alf's mindfulness meditation. And this will help you to stay in your ventral vagal response. Thank you, Alf.
I'm here today to invite you into a mindfulness meditation session that involves some breath work, some guided relaxation, and some affirmations. Let us begin. You may close your eyes or leave them open until you feel to close them. We're going to start with breathing. Breathing in for a count of 4, holding for a count of 4, breathing out for a count of 4, and then holding that exhale for a count of 4. I shall repeat this 4 times. Breathing in and holding, and now exhale. Breathing in again. Nice, slow, deep breath in, hold, and then release that breath. Empty those lungs and hold that emptiness for a moment. And breathe in again. How delicious it is to breathe mindfully. Hold that breath, enjoy it, and then savor the release. And exhale. Sit with the stillness of the empty lungs and that last breath in, deeply relaxing, filling the lungs, holding, and then releasing. Yes. Now our bodies are a lot more relaxed and our mind is starting to slow down. It's a perfect time to bring your awareness to your feet. Maybe you could wiggle your toes and roll your ankles from side to side. And then move up to your calves. Flex your toes back. You can feel the contraction in your calf muscle. And then push your toes out. And then I want to bring your awareness up to your knees. What a great load they carry. In between the thighs and the calves and the feet, they do serve us well. Come up to those thighs, largest muscle group. They center and balance us and help us carry the heavy loads that we may sometimes carry. Let's use them to great effect. Let's be consciously aware of them right now. And then move up to our lower back. Let's do a little side to side. Maybe tense your buttocks as well and release. Work your way up to your chest. Put your hands there maybe and feel the breath raising, lowering. And your tummy muscles, maybe give them a tighten and they'll relax. Up to your shoulders now. What are you holding up there? Give them a roll. Back and forth with your shoulder blades maybe. That will feel good. And your neck, one ear to your shoulder, and then slowly to the other side. Your chin to your chest. And then your head back. Feel that lovely deep stretch. Be gentle with yourself. Do this slowly. Feel the relaxation after stretching and concentrating on those every single part of your body. Go to your biceps now and travel down to your forearms and those hands of yours. Your wrists, give them a roll, wiggle your fingers, contract and release them. And now to your face. I'd love you to do a little bit of embarrassing faces. Think about stretching your mouth wide open and releasing any tension that you might have in your jaw. Raising your eyebrows as high as you can, holding it, and then letting them drop. Scrunching up your nose. Can you wiggle your ears? When you think about all the little micro muscles that create the unique expressions of your face, it's quite miraculous. And now I'm going to ask you to contract and tense every single muscle group and body part that I've gone through. Hold that, hold it. I know you have to think, oh, activate this one, activate that one. And hold it. Yes, it's uncomfortable. Oh, this is terrible. No. Just hold it a little longer because it's worth the release as you now let go and relax everything. Yes. Deeply feeling your body. I think you're ready now for some affirmations. I shall begin. I am doing things every single day to show my body and my mind acts of love. I'll leave a space for you to repeat this. I am worthy. I am deserving. I am full of love and light. I am confident in my ability to be respected. I am confident to know what to say. I am confident to stabilize my state at all times. I am confident to handle lower emotions and not project them outward. I am confident in every moment, every day. I am worthy of the success that I now instantly manifest. I am trusting myself to achieve anything I bring into my awareness. I am always validated and confident within myself, and I do not seek validation outside of me. I am always in a state of clarity, truth, and trust. I have made all feelings of doubt, grief, fear, sadness completely powerless. I am living my dream life, full of romance, abundance, and good times. I invite you now to gently bring yourself back and stretch. Take some deep breaths. Open your eyes. Smile outwardly and inwardly. Thank yourself, and I thank you for joining me in this self-caring and restorative practice. Blessings and love be with you. I'd also like to add that I have drawn these affirmations from a mindset coach called Dylan James. If you'd like to follow up and see what they might have to offer you with mindfulness to further look after your mind, your body, and your soul. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Fantastic. Thanks, Anna.
Thank you.
any more questions today, but I'm sure that we can get your questions to Anna if you have them and you want to email them through.
Absolutely.
Really appreciate your time today, Anna.
Thank you. Thanks.
All right. So now we're just going to move on, and Belle's going to introduce our next group.
Right. Thank you, Bronwyn. It's time for us to learn about a range of carer supports and resources from our experienced panel of presenters. We welcome them in order of appearance now. Michelle Hegerty is an occupational therapist working in the Eastern Region FATMI program, an initiative which works to improve outcomes for families where parents have a mental illness. Michelle has a strong interest in family-focused practice, peer support, co-design, and service development. And I'm just turning the page. And despite what they say in show business, she loves working with animals, children, and young people. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Belle. So I work with the FATMI program, and FATMI is a statewide program with a key role in building the capacity of our services and our community to meet the needs of families where parents have a mental illness. We do that through service development, education, information, partnerships, and peer support programs. So many of the people who are coming into our services are parents with children, some with dependent children, others who may be in alternate care arrangements. In fact, between 12 and 45% of people in public mental health services are parents, and up to 70% of children who attend a child mental health service have a parent with mental illness. In fact, in the general population, up to a quarter of Australian children will have at least one parent with a mental health condition. So it's actually really common for us to have someone in our family with mental health or AOD concerns. And many of the children actually don't come into contact with mental health services, which is why the FATMI program actually works across our entire region with a whole range of community services like schools and GPs and community nurses, youth services, etc., so that they too have capacity to respond to the needs of families and link them to supports as needed. So many of the children who come into contact with our program actually think that they're the only one and that their family is quite different. So it's actually quite incredible when kids come into our group programs and that light bulb goes off when they realise that they're not the only one. So that message there, you are not alone, is a really common one in our FATMI programs. So many of the children and young people in FATMI families also provide caring role, undertake a caring role. And like lots of carers, many of the children and young people actually don't sort of define themselves as a carer. So the numbers here may actually be quite underestimated. But what we do know is that for a number of children and young people, they provide a range of caring roles, including emotional support. They might monitor medication, assist with homework, care for their siblings. They might be watching out for signs of mental illness and linking their loved one with services when needed. So it's really important to acknowledge the value that families place on caring, and it's a really important role for children and young people. One of the things that we do also within the FATMI program is promote a balance with age-appropriate activities, including sports and socialising and respite activities. And so we provide a young carer support fund to assist young people to access some of those, as well as access their education. So from a FATMI perspective, we encourage these 3 key steps, and these are 3 steps that practitioners and service providers or supporters can take, but we also encourage families to be taking these 3 steps. And the first one is around sharing information, talking about mental illness, and encouraging families to have a shared understanding of what's happening around the mental health of their loved one, but also of the well-being, mental health and well-being of all family members. It's also really important to be thinking about support, not just for the person themselves, for the consumer, but the support needs of all family members. And then the third key step is around planning ahead for when things might get a bit wobbly. For example, if a parent needs to take a break or needs to go into hospital, having plans in place for who might care for the children, what the usual routines are, and who the key contacts and supports are. This is just a really important reminder, and it's actually part of the Mental Health Act, that staff also have a responsibility not only for the safety of children and young people, but also for their well-being and development. So it's a really key thing for us to be asking parent consumers if they have children, what their ages are, what the care arrangements are, and identifying with the parents any needs or supports that might be required. And what we know actually is that parenting is a significant driver in people's recovery. So parents indicate that when parenting is actually considered in their mental health and AOD recovery, that the outcomes are really significantly improved. So this is a really simple tool that we can use, that anyone can use this actually when they're engaging with families, and it's something that's quite hands-on, quite literally, that, you know, if you're working with a family, you can actually ask all family members to trace around their hand and identify who is in their helping hand. So who are the key supports or the contacts that they might have in an ongoing way? So who do they go to if they need some assistance, or if there was you know, a time where they needed to get some additional support in place. And so we do this in the CHAMPS programs with the children, and they might talk about their mums and dads being, you know, key people that they would talk to. It might be a teacher, it could be a neighbour. We sometimes put the kids' helpline number in there. It could be a pet, you know, and lots of kids will talk about how they, you know, seek out support and comfort from their pets. Just wanted to mention some of the peer support groups and services that we do provide with the FATMI program. And so Space for Us for young people, CHAMPS and martial arts as therapy for primary age children. We partner with a number of organisations, and Vmch and Wellways are current partners with us with our group programs. We also run school holiday activities and run a monthly kids club, which is in partnership with each. And I've also just listed a number of other services that are available in our region: Satellite Foundation, Kookaburra Kids, Bringing Up Great Kids for Parents as a parents group. And we also refer through to other carer support services like Vmch, which we've heard from earlier today, and their young carer supports. I just wanted to read a couple of comments from families and children who have been part of our group programs. It's opened up the door now. They can talk about it anytime. It's not a secret and it's not hidden. Now we know, and we can think and say to ourselves, hey, we're not the only family that's going through this. Mum's not the only adult that has these problems or that has some mental health issues. And another comment, I don't worry as much as I used to about mum when I go to school, if she's going to be lonely or something. It helped us understand and everything and what was going on. And then finally, the benefit for me, for the family as a whole, is to make the girls realise that they're not alone. So just to let you know, FATMI resources are available to people across the eastern region. If you're not in the east, There are FATMI coordinators in every mental health service across the state. So we're available to provide secondary consultations. You can give us a call and talk about supports that might be available. The Let's Talk resource is actually a framework for having conversations with parents about their children, and really puts parents in the driver's seat about their children's needs and what they would like to be putting in place around their family. FATMI has a range of resources in libraries. We have those at Eastern Health, but we also have worked with public libraries to have a number of resources available. And we've also worked towards having far more family-focused and family-friendly environments in our inpatient units and community clinics. And we're very excited to say that we've just launched in the last few days our new website. So here's the link here. And you can actually find much more information about our group programs and other services and referral forms on that website. This is just one of our books that is available. If you were interested in resources, you can give us a call and we can get materials out to you for your work to support families that you're working with. And this is our email address. And so in the wonderful words of Paul Kelly, we know that from little things, big things grow. And so we start the conversations and ensure that all kids have access to the information and supports that they need. So thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. And sharing about how FATMI can be of support for the young ones and their families. And as you mentioned, you're not alone. Okay, well, now we're going to move on to Shark. Fiona Anderson represents Shark today. Fiona is the Family Support Group Coordinator. Originally working as a business manager, HR manager, Fiona completely changed direction and moved into the drug and alcohol sector, partly due to having a family member with a substance use problem. We welcome Fiona.
Thanks, Belle, for that. Thank you. I'm just going to give you a brief overview of which is a story about all that we do at Shark and Family Drug and Gambling Help, where I'm based at the moment. Little bit about us. Shark is founded on the belief that people are experts in their own recovery, and I think that's really important. Addiction can affect everybody, and we've spoken about this in lots of areas today. But the main areas that I work in are with families and friends of those who are affected. We do believe that recovery is absolutely possible with the right information, education, and support. One of the real basis of everything that we do here at Shark and all of our programs is lived experience of those affected by addiction. And we have a very large peer worker program, and we believe that the expertise and empathy of peers ensures that all of our programs are welcoming, inclusive, and effective. Surprisingly enough, I know maybe some of you haven't heard of Shark, but we've actually been around for 25 years. And the next slide is just a little brief history, and I won't go into great detail of this because I believe you'll be getting a copy of our slide decks. We actually started in 1983, and it was established originally as a community of ex-drug users with the purpose of assisting those with significant AOD-related problems. Things changed as the years moved on, and we started in 1987 with self-help groups with a harm minimisation approach. In the year 2000, Family Drug Help and APSU were formed. APSU is a great acronym, but it's for the Association of Participating Service Users. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but it was funded under the Shark umbrella of services and a natural extension of Shark self-help philosophy. We purchased a big church in 2004. We're not affiliated with a church, but we're living in a church at the moment. Beautiful building, but we found that our programs were expanding to such a great extent that we needed more work and more places for us to work. from then till now, I mean, when I constantly look at this this slide and I think, wow, we've come from a group of that started in 1983 to deal with ex-drug users. We now have programs like APSU, Family Drug and Gambling Help. Gambling has just come on board recently. We've got peer projects and residential peer programs. One exciting thing about APSU is that it is the peak Victorian consumer body for people who use, have used, or are eligible to use AOD services. And that includes family members again. Family members are a big part of APSU. Not discounting the significant others of people who are impacted by AOD use. And it's a huge consumer voice, and we have a lot to do with policy research and the provision of professional learning, professional development. Where I'm working is within Family Drug and Gambling Help, and we've got so many things going on. We provide practical help, information and support to families. We have professional and peer-based services right across Victoria. We are finding that we're getting a lot more people coming in from interstate and a couple even from overseas at the moment, which is really exciting. We provide counselling, support groups, which Belle mentioned a little bit about me. I'm the Family Support Group Coordinator. We run psychoeducational programs, and we've got two running which you may or may not have heard of. One called Breakthrough, and that's run in conjunction with Turning Point and the Bouverie Centre, and we've got an In Focus program. And of course, our 24-hour helpline for families to call through on. Peer Project one is just going ahead in leaps and bounds at the moment, and we do peer workforce training, peer workforce supervision. We've got a community of practice. We have, and we are starting to move quite strongly into peer mentors in justice. We do run intentional peer support or IPS training, and really important is organisational readiness training. You know, are organisations ready to bring on peer workers? And the last area we're involved in is residential peer programs, and we do offer residential-based programs for adults and young people seeking recovery. We've got a number of houses. Our recent houses have been purchased and they're operating in the Frankston area. So it's a really exciting time for us. I think one of our oldest residents in one of our houses is 62 years old. So he's been there for quite a while and he's absolutely thriving. Trying to move on to the next slide, but my clicker is not moving. So Bron, thank you. Okay, so I did talk really briefly about the FDGH, and I still can't get my tongue around that, Family Drug and Gambling Help Program overview. I spoke a little bit about our 24/7 helpline, and there's the number up there. That's a line that family members or significant others can call at any time when they just don't know what to do, when they need help. And we've got trained volunteers who work on that line, and they are, my dogs are going to start barking in a minute, and they have people with a lived experience. They've been there, and we use that the wording of we've been there, we care. And I think that's the great part of a peer model in a workforce, is that the people who are interacting with callers, people in support groups and our psychoeducational programs actually have a lived experience. They understand the emotions, the trauma, the crisis, the fear, the anxiety, the stigma. They understand all of it. So they can come alongside clinicians to support the clinical role and the people that work in the counselling areas, and they can provide that understanding for the family members that they're encountering. Bron, would you mind just moving on to the next slide, please? Thank you. Thanks. We've got, as I spoke about, the family and friends support groups. We've got groups all around Victoria, and I've listed 15 that we've got up there at the moment in Victoria, and they reach a lot of people. One group that is different from the rest is what's called our supper club, which is a grief and loss group. Within that group, the facilitator is actually a qualified grief counsellor, and she has worked on Griefline as well. So her facilitation is a little bit different to a lot of the other groups where they're peer-led. Fran at the supper club is a qualified grief counsellor, and I think it's really important in that area that somebody does have reasonable qualifications, because we're people dealing with members there who definitely are in huge crisis. Different to groups like Al-Anon, we have two different components to our groups, where we do run an educational component, and we do bring in a lot of different speakers that are qualified to talk on certain topics. And then we do move through into the sharing and reflection session, which is similar to other groups. As I mentioned, supper club. Fran's special interest is in grief and loss, and as I mentioned, she's worked on the Griefline call centre, and she's facilitated the supper club for the last 6 years. We have family counselling, which is free. We provide free family counselling for people. We used to be regulated by area, but we're not anymore. We run a Victoria-wide family counselling program, and that can be done either in person, on the phone, Zoom, telehealth, whatever. But a comment that we've had from somebody who's gone through our family counselling is written there below in italics, and it says it's had an enormous positive impact personally, and it's enhanced all relationships in the family with the children and also my husband. I've experienced counselling and therapy for over 30 years, but have never benefited more from that more than I have from family drug help. So that's a really great attestation of our programs. I spoke really briefly about Breakthrough. It was initially developed out of the Victorian government's funding for the ICE Action Plan. We've broadened the scope of that now, and we now talk about all drugs rather than just methamphetamines. And we help and provide families with information about things like what happens to the brain when substances are repeatedly used. A lot of the things we talk about is how can family members make their lives a bit more manageable. So we go into certain things like boundaries and safety plans, or, you know, as was mentioned a little bit before, changing that wording, and I've lost my book, changing that wording a little bit to a resilience plan. We go through things like that as well. In Focus is a little bit different to our Breakthrough. Breakthroughs run over 2 nights. At the moment, also because of the restrictions that we're under, we're running Breakthrough online as well as In Focus, and you'll see that on Eventbrite. So if you direct people to Eventbrite Breakthrough, you'll find it's operating as a 1-hour component on Eventbrite. Really good way that it's pivoted into a great program for families. We have In Focus too, which is a little bit more in depth, and it allows families to really connect with a group. We have groups of about 12 to 15 people. There is a real bond and connection formed within the In Focus program with families. It does provide a little bit more in-depth knowledge and understanding than is provided within the Breakthrough program. And what we're finding is that families will then move on to one of our support groups once they've finished the In Focus program. You will find information on our website for a lot of these programs as well, and I'll give you our websites shortly. We've got a totally different program that we're involved in, and I didn't put it up on the front screen, but it's called MyF, MYAF stands for the Muslim Youth, Adult and Families Program. And I'll just read directly from that. It's a service delivered to the community free of cost and is based at the My Centre Support Services in Glenroy. We provide part of the team. We have a counsellor that works out there, and we deliver a peer-based model again of support to families. And bottom of that slide there, I've got contact details for MYAF, which you will be getting when you get a copy of the slide deck. So a quick summary. I have rushed through this quite quickly, but I'll just do a really quick summary of this. At SHARC, we support over 9,000 individuals and families annually, and our programs and services operate locally across Victoria and increasingly nationally. Peer support and lived experience are central to our work and everything that we do. We provide telephone and online support, educational programs, counselling, peer support groups, residential recovery, consumer representation, supervision for peer workers and workforce training. If you're looking for support for yourself or your family, or friends, or community, or merely to enhance your work with others, we can help you at SHARC, and we love to hear from you. The website's a little bit hard to see up there on a red slide, but it's www.shark.org.au, or our main reception. The number is there as well. So I do want to thank you for listening in to this presentation. My email address, if you would like to contact me for more information, is up there, along with our website, our main phone number, and of course, our helpline. So thank you. And I've gone one ahead. Stop thrill seeking. And that's it. Thank you for me.
We're just waiting for Belle. Love your thrill seeking, Fiona. Fantastic.
Thank you.
Job.
Awesome.
We'll take some questions in the panel, and we're heading into Wendy's presentation now. Belle, are you with us?
Okay, right. Thank you, Fiona, for outlining all the expansive programs that SHARC provide that is the ongoing support for people who are in need. Thank you. Right, Wendy Aziot is a manager of Tandem Support Services. Wendy is a social worker with over 20 years experience in the mental health and carer services sector. Wendy will tell us about this peak body for mental health carers in Victoria. Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you, Belle. I just would like to also thank Julie for her, welcome to country, and also I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we're meeting on today and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and any community members that are with us. I'd also like to recognise the carers and support people amongst us today, and we celebrate the incredible work that you do and the work you do to support the people in your life. Oh, a little bit about Tandem. So the clicker thing I think I've organised, but Tandem is the Victorian peak body with the sole focus on the needs and interests of mental health carers. Our role is to provide leadership, coordination and knowledge for the organisations and individuals who are working to improve outcomes for Victorian people living with mental health issues. We're committed to ensuring that the importance of the contribution, expertise, experience and needs of family and friends and carers is recognised and addressed, and that they are essential partners in treatment, service delivery, planning, research and evaluation. Tandem also aims to ensure that federal and state governments recognise the role and contribution, but also the needs of carers of people with mental health issues. We facilitate communication between government and other stakeholders in mental health system. And as I think, Bronwyn, I'm glad that you mentioned the Royal Commission earlier on, because this has been very important for Tandem over the last 18 months. We have worked very hard to support families to have their voices heard during the Royal Commission into Victoria's mental health system. We've supported them with witness statements, individual submissions, and also the submission from Tandem, which you can read on our website. I guess our mantra during this time has been for a fair, funded, and inclusive and safe mental health system. Mental health carers, well, who are they? And I think we've heard a little bit from everyone today, which is really encouraging. But mental health carers are family members, friends, partners, or another person of any age who will commonly be actively involved in caring and supporting for a person with mental health issues. This role is not necessarily static, but rather a role that is capable of fluctuation over time according to the needs of the person with mental health issues and their carer. Carers are diverse and come from all ages, but most likely aged between 55 and 64, according to the 2018 ABS stats on the Disability, Ageing and Carers Summary of Findings. Another interesting thing is 70% of all primary carers are women. And I know we've talked a little bit today about young carers, and I think you'll see from our slide 15% are young carers under the age of 25. And I think this is a conservative stat because many people do not associate with the term of carers. So they don't identify as carers and do not access information, services and supports. And I think, as we can see from this slide, the work of unpaid carers contributes enormously to the Australian economy. I also want to acknowledge what David said earlier about, carers don't access, in an unpaid caring role, you don't have access to superannuation, leave entitlements. You're providing that assistance that is unpaid and often unrecognised. As you can see from the slide, 36 hours a week is often provided in support from a carer. That's a full-time job. So as I mentioned before, we're the peak body for family and friends in mental health, and our sole focus is on mental health. We provide systemic and individual advocacy for family and friends, both generally and NDIS related. And when I say generally, it's generally around mental health. We also manage the Mental Health Carer Support Fund, which I will talk to you about a little bit later. And obviously the supports we provide at an organisation level, we advocate for family and friend involvement in planning and care, participation in system change and support. We promote the support and development of the mental health carer workforce, which we've also heard a little bit about. We inform and empower family and friends to access the National Disability Insurance Scheme. And we also promote and collaborate with the service delivery, collaborate on the delivery of training and family inclusive practice. One of the things we also do is we have a Tandem mental health carer registry, and the carer register is a pool of trained mental health carers that have representatives from across the state. Members of the register use their lived experience, knowledge of the mental health system, and their communication skills to advocate and promote on the issues and concerns of mental health carers. At Tandem, we're frequently approached by a wide range of organisations seeking mental health carer representatives. We promote these opportunities to our registered members, but we also include the representation on positions of state committees, boards, working groups, speaking at conferences and events. So you can see more about this on our website. So please have a look at that if you're interested in being on our mental health carer register. We also, I also just want to also mention, Dave talked about carer education, and we're currently at Tandem working through carer modules to be delivered to clinicians across Victoria's mental health area mental health services in terms of the value of recognising and including family members in the treatment and support of carers. I think I'm going to the next slide. So the carer support and referral service. Carer support and referral service is an office hours-based service. It's a 1-800 free call, Monday to Friday. The kinds of advocacy we support here, when I talked earlier about systemic advocacy, this is where we really draw on callers coming in and with their individual needs. So a lot of it, 99% of it is about Victoria's mental health system, the clinical system, and how carers can have better access and information about the person they're caring for, but also too about the NDIS system, which is consistently changing, and that interface with mental health services and NDIS is really something that keeps our advisors busy. We obviously liaise with mental health services, clinical and community. We support carers through the complaints process. So a lot of the calls coming through, we're actually supporting carers to understand their rights, so what they can do as a carer, but also to advocate that they do have rights as carers. One of the things I think is really important, and when people come to us, one of the first things they will say is, I've been everywhere else. I don't know where to start. System navigation in terms of the mental health system is really important. It's complex, it's changing. We're going to see that again with the new changes after the Royal Commission. So system navigation is something that people just, it needs a dedicated role to that. A lot of our advocacy, as mentioned before, is in terms of mental health tribunal. It's about complaints, what's happened to the person they care for, so through things like Office of the Chief Psychiatrist, VCAT. But when I say that, Tandem offers a non-legal advocacy role. So, there's only so much we can do, and so many people are caught up in a system that is so complex and so not recognising family and carers supporting people with mental health issues. What we've done over the last 12 months, the Carer Support and Referral Service received some funding from state government during COVID. So we were boosted over 12 months to keep people supported and access to information. So during this time, we have introduced online services. So we have a monthly Tandem time where we provide information to carers about what's happening across the system. Today we had, for example, a session with our members to talk about the new carer and wellbeing centres and what they would like to see happening in those centres. So we do try and keep people at the very forefront of not only just keeping them abreast of what's happening, but keeping or making sure that we keep honest and refer those carer voices back up. So the Carer Support Fund, this is something that we administer on behalf of area mental health services. What is it? Well, the Carer Support Funds meet the needs of carers who are providing funding, meets the needs of mental health carers by providing funding to assist their support role and improve their wellbeing. Who is eligible? Well, it's family members or friends who are supporting a person who's receiving services from an area mental health service. And, you know, what can the fund be used for? There's a variety of things. I'll give you a couple of examples. I know time is of the essence, but transport, for example. So it may be assisting with the cost associating to visiting the person in a mental health hospital or accompanying them to appointments. It may be about carer education programs or conferences. A good example of that is perhaps the THEMS conference that's coming up in October. We also look at reimbursement of costs. So there may be some things that, you know, especially during COVID, where people were unable to perhaps meet their own utility bill. So you were able to take your utility bill to your area mental health service and say, I need some support with that. Who can you talk to about the about the Carer Support Fund? Well, you get all that information from the area mental health service. So this would be including case managers, carer peer support workers, carer consultants, or other family workers. They will ask you some basic questions about your caring role. I think it is important to mention that the funds are limited. So Tandem doesn't put any cap on the funds. That's based on the area mental health service, and I think based on demand. So carer supports in the community. Obviously, our Tandem support and referral line, as I mentioned, we're office hours 5 days a week. I would encourage you to go onto our website to look at not only our policy submissions, but to join Tandem, perhaps join our carer register. Everything's there. We are updating the website at the moment. So if you go on today and then go on 3 weeks later, you might see some change, but the basic information will be there. Carer Gateway, well, the Carer Gateway is another organisation that we refer carers to. That's funded federally through the Department of Social Services. And over the last 12 months, we've delivered mental health carer packages during COVID, and we've had a really fantastic response to that. That program is now finished. But what we have learnt during that time is how important it is to make access to carer brokerage for mental health carers easy, practical, and something that they will benefit from. And I think, as we heard earlier, I'm talking about the Support for Carers program from Danielle, Amanda and Ev. And yes, if depending on where you are today, if you ring the 1-800 number or go onto the Carers Victoria website, you will see your local Support for Carers program in your area. It's a statewide program, and I think it is really flexible, so I would encourage you to do that. And really, that's it for me.
Thank you, Wendy, for bringing awareness of all the services that Tandem focus on in the mental health sector for the carer. Okay, now we're moving on to Kathy Calais. Kathy has worked as a carer consultant for the adult mental health program for the past 8 years at Eastern Health. Kathy is passionate about improving the public mental system to give all people living with mental health concerns and their families respect, care, support, and for the best opportunity for recovery. Kathy is going to share with us some information about carer supports and the lived experience workforce at Eastern Health. We welcome Kathy.
Thank you, Belle. Thank you. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about how our carer support works at Eastern Health. And we work very hard to ensure that carers and families are included in core work. And our team of carer peer workers is growing, and I'm very pleased to say that we have some excellent workers working directly with carers, supporting them. So my carer consultant role works at a systemic level and really trying to improve the uptake of working with carers across the whole program. And I also chair the Eastern Carers Network meeting, which is a very important for carers, it's a little bit like Emska, and we share and disseminate a lot of information. I also work at state level around improving things for carers, and also work with the Department of Health around the Carer Experience Survey. Last year, we had the Carer Experience Survey rolled out across the state for the first time ever, and we're very pleased to have that now embedded in the system, and it will be offered every year, which will give us a baseline on how carers perceive they are included in our services, and will also give us opportunities for improvement. So very pleased about the Carer Experience Survey. Sorry, I just need to click forward. The carer, we have a number of carer support workers across our services. The ones we have in the inpatient units are to do with the post-discharge peer support initiative. And so anybody who has a loved one admitted to the unit can have access to carer support from these experienced carer workers. Dave Neef is one of them. So we also have a new program called Carers in the Community, which are carer peer workers now based at Murnon Clinic and Coonung Clinic. For those of you who've been working in the East for a long time, this is really the replacement of the COPES program. So we're very, very pleased to be able to offer that. And families can self-refer and case managers refer to those services. We also have a carer peer worker at the park, and we also have carer peer workers in our new and expanding HOPE programs across the whole region. I'm sorry, my clicker keeps dropping out. Could you just click me forward, Bron? Thanks. I won't go into too much detail about the Carer Support Fund because Wendy has covered this, but just know that it's available. It is available only to consumers who are case managed in the public mental health service. So that's important to know, but we do work very hard to get that money out to carers, and we do have some restrictions around caps per annum. I will, we also have, just for those who've worked in this area for a while, vouchers are no longer available post-COVID, but we do have a $300 COVID emergency direct credit payment that is very useful for families. So carer support groups in the Eastern region, we work closely alongside a lot of these carer support groups, and carers find them so supportive and so useful. There's a list of the groups there. Archers is run by Shark, who we've already heard from, and that's a great group. There's also a couple of carer helpline numbers there that you can access. And what we have been running for many years is an Understanding Mental Illness and Recovery information night for carers. And I'd just like to reinforce that this night is open to anybody. They don't have to be an Eastern Health client. So it's for anybody in the Eastern region. And we welcome all families and friends who want to be part of the recovery journey. It's on the first Monday night of each month, excluding January and November. And it's a really good place for carers to start, and it's a good opportunity. We have lots of time to chat one-on-one, and we point carers in the right direction for lots of different help and support, and try to explain the myth and labyrinth that they're in around mental health and how to navigate that system. So that flyer, the Understanding Mental Illness and Recovery, can be found on the Eastern Health website, and everyone is welcome to that. I have really run through this because I know that we're running short of time, and I'm always available if people would like to contact me at Eastern Health if they would like any more information about the way we help and refer carers. So thanks, Bron and Belle.
Thanks, Jackie. That's excellent. Yep, it's great to hear all the things that you're doing there at Eastern Health for around carer support. We're about to move into a panel discussion now. So for the four presenters that we've just heard from, so if you all would like to make sure your monitors are on, we're going to switch to our Q&A. And I think all those who are in Slido, you'll be able to see the Q&A. So please like any questions that you would like us to ask, and add any if you haven't already had a chance to ask your questions. So we're going to start with a question from Michelle. How are young people identified as carers?
I think that's one of the issues, and Wendy also touched on this before. A lot of people don't necessarily identify with the language or the label carers, and so I think perhaps often people identify around their relationship with their loved ones. So often people will say, well, I'm not a carer, I'm actually her daughter, or I'm not a carer, I'm actually her mum. And so, we really, well, certainly when we're engaging with families, identify what type of roles people play in their families, as opposed to perhaps using some of that language. But anyone can identify as a carer. There's absolutely no limits on, if you're undertaking some of those support roles, then, there's no sort of defining thing apart from having those roles in your life. And I see Wendy's just come off mic. She might like to add something there.
I have, but couldn't find my hand up thing. I just wanted to say that I really think it's about service providers, not just mental health service providers. Young carers care for many caring relationships. I think it's about service providers educating themselves to recognise young carers. I know in a previous role that I had with a young carer program, young children in primary school have caring roles. We think, no, they can't. They're kids, but they do. And so often they get left behind. They get seen as the student that's always late, or the student that doesn't complete their homework. So I think we need to better prepare ourselves and educate ourselves about carers.
Absolutely, Wendy. And there is a question there for you, which was what's being done to help people. Sorry, it's just gone off my screen. What's being done to help carers identify themselves as carers? What's being done? Look, and that's something we're currently. It's about language, isn't it? And that's something Tandem is currently looking at with the reforms to the mental health system. So we're now calling services mental health and wellbeing. So it's about identifying different ways of talking about a caring role. So it really is about language, because many people just see themselves as family members.
You're my mum, you're my brother, you're my sister. So I think, again, going back to services, looking at and to funders, how do we better engage with those people that we call hidden carers who don't identify as carers? So it is a work in progress.
Yeah, I'd just like to add, the FATMI program was actually really pleased in the Royal Commission to see that there's an entire recommendation, number 32, focusing on young carers. And so, which also sees an expansion of funding to, brokerage and young carer support. And so I actually think that trend in some of the use of language and identification will start to change.
Thank you. One for Fiona now. How do you manage confidentiality issues to enable support for AOD carers?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Thanks to whoever asked that one. I think the difference with our support groups is that we always bring the focus back to the family member. Our groups are not about how can I help, how can I fix, how do I get them not to, to continue using drugs or alcohol, how do I get them to take their medication because they're doing this. Our groups, we turn the focus around to the family member. What can that family member do to change their communication style, to support themselves, to live a more stress-free life? So it's a support group not for them to fix their family member. It is for them to help themselves lead better lives. And I think that's the big difference. Our residential support services programs are run by the manager of our residential program. They will not discuss the client, the person that we have in the rehab area, unless there is a confidentiality agreement between the client and the client is quite happy for us to do that, and we'll do that in a family session more than likely rather than in a support group. But bringing it back to what the family needs, how they can set their boundaries, how they can use I statements, communication, all those sorts of things. We teach them about cycle of change and all that sort of stuff, and the family's cycle of change. So there's not really a confidentiality issue because we turn them around and help them focus on themselves.
Oh, that's terrific. Thanks, Fiona. Yeah, I was just thinking too around, AOD services traditionally have been focused on the substance user. Mm-hmm. And so is there some mechanism by which people who, when they're in a counselling situation, are asked, well, who are your key supports and can we please reach out to them and offer them something?
Yes, we do, and that's done in the family counselling area. Yep. Certainly, if we can do that, we will. We do strongly recommend that they ask the questions that they may be asking us to the carers of their loved one. We're not the ones to be answering those because of the focus of our support groups. We teach them how to navigate that system. What are the best ways to do that? That's what we're all about.
Fantastic. Thanks, Fiona. Quick one for Michelle about whether children are able to access supports if their parent has a mental illness, but the child's not the carer.
Yes, absolutely. We FATMI work with families of all shapes and sizes, and we also have young people who access our programs who have siblings who have mental health concerns. So, we shape our programs and our supports to really meet the needs where people are at.
Yeah, fabulous. Quick one now for Kathy. How do you find staff work with the carer lived experience workers at Eastern Health? So you've got carer lived experience workers at Eastern Health. How does staff work with them?
Well, I think we're improving that working relationship. We have a component of our mandatory training that is around family, children and carers, and talk to all new staff about the importance of including family. And in general, staff are just so pleased to have that support from the family worker to be able to refer families on to for their own support. So, of course, there's always work to be done and education, but we're really moving forward with that. And, of course, all the recommendations that have come out of the Royal Commission all point back to peer-led and peer support in all areas of our programs.
Fantastic, Kathy. Dave, did you want to add anything to that? I know Dave Neve's still with us. He is actually a carer support person. Oh, he might have dropped off now. That's okay, no problem. Okay, so we'll move on to another question for Fiona. Grief and loss groups, is that for people who've lost a loved one through death, or the grief and loss people experience when they lose someone to drugs?
That grief and loss group is primarily for the loss of somebody through death of drugs and alcohol, whatever, or mental health. In many of our groups, we do deal with the other type of grief, which is called unconventional grief. It's the loss of what we thought was going to be. The person may still be living, but they're not the person that we once thought they were going to be. They haven't got the same job. So we deal with both aspects, one in our regular support groups, the other one within of death from suicide or from drug and alcohol, whatever that might be, within the supper club or the grief and loss group. So, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Now, one last one for Wendy. This is our last question. David, anybody's allowed to jump in, of course. Wendy, support for carers who aren't formally recognised through Services Australia, who don't get payments. Are there differences in what they can access?
You're on mute, Wendy.
Had to be one of us here today. So, look, it's a really good question. Many of the carers we support, when I mentioned our COVID packages previously, we support all carers. So it's about people who perhaps fall through the cracks of Services Australia, so whether that be visa restrictions, perhaps refugees waiting for permanent residency. But I think one of the things that we talk about, and I think, this is something that we have certainly fed back to Services Australia and work closely with them around accessing payments for mental health carers. It's a little bit tricky, in terms of, so an example I might say to a carer will say, well, look, the form is asking me is, can the person feed themselves? But yes, they can, but I might have taken, an hour and a half to convince them that the food was safe to eat. And so it really is about recognising, I think, the difference in a psychosocial disability, and I think that's work we need to do, and hopefully that will happen. But look, in terms of carer supports, it is, as I said to you before, there is the main federal carer gateway, there's a support for carers program, and often if you can get linked into those programs, you can at least get some evidence to put forward to a claim to Services Australia. Say, well, look, I've been getting support from Tandem or from Each or from wherever it may be, Villa Maria, and this is what I'm getting. So look, it is really tricky.
Thanks, Wendy. You've answered that beautifully. All right, I just want to thank all our presenters in this section of the presentation today. Michelle Hegerty from FAPME, Fiona Anderson from Shark, Wendy Azett from Tandem Carers, and Kathy Collet from Eastern Health. We're going to move on now. Belle. You there, Belle? That's fine. I can.
Oh, sorry. I thought I muted. I unmuted myself. Many apologies. Sorry. Tom Larkey is the clinical lead with Nimo's Psychosocial Support Service in Eastern Melbourne. Tom is the chair of the Carers Working Group at Nimo's Psychosocial Support Service and is enthusiastic about increasing the level of involvement of carers across various spheres of influence in the program. Tom is going to speak with us about ways in which carers can contribute to the development and delivery of health and community services. We welcome Tom.
Thanks, Belle. Am I on? Can you hear me?
You're loud and clear.
Excellent. Thank you. Just wanted to quickly thank Michelle, Fiona, Wendy, and Kathy. As someone working in a mental health service, it was very educational, and I'm going to bring a lot of that to my team. So I work with the Psychosocial Support Service in the East, which is NEMA is a mental health organisation. So the psychosocial support is really the mental health support for people who are not yet on the NDIS, but not getting support through tertiary services or area mental health clinics. So we kind of fill that gap. I'll just see if my clicker's working. This is a very short presentation, but it's a little bit about the growth area, I guess, of carer participation at NEMA in general. So to start off, consumer participation has always been a strong suit for us. And we've, I guess, some examples of that. Every time we interview for a new position, we have a consumer sitting on the panel. As far as groups that we run, the consumer input into that involves not only what group should be run, but also co-facilitating those groups. And we have something called the Consumer Participation Working Group, which recently was tasked to actually develop a new peer role for one of our other programs. So a real kind of, I guess, a collaborative and empowered sense of consumer participation is existing. However, carer participation at the moment and generally would fall under the umbrella of involvement in the support of our consumers, and that would be generally support workers supporting the consumer, and then they would have the carer as part of the care team. So the usual type of thing you would see with a carer involved when their loved one is receiving support. Aside from that, we would offer something called the Family and Carer Support Prompt, which essentially was a list, a tick box kind of list for carers to go through and see if there's any areas they are needing support with, and then workers can put them onto relevant services, whether it's linking them to Carers Victoria or Tandem or whatever it is. An example of that prompt, it's a bit blurry because it's small, but that's kind of what the prompt looks like. Essentially, that's kind of at the moment, the limit of where and how carers are involved. So we thought we want to get this changed a little and get more carer participation in the running of the service. So I've called it moving toward more authentic carer participation. To kick this off, as Belle mentioned, there was a carers working group, which was at the moment is just staff, including myself and some support workers. We did some brainstorming and we thought a lot of feedback coming from the carer space was they weren't quite sure what we did a lot of the time, or how we deal with confidentiality. We thought that'd be a good place to start to build up a sheet for carers that can be provided when we commence support with a new consumer, and there's a carer involved. We can give them that sheet as something to take away, and with phone numbers they can call. So at the bottom there it says the outline was to show what we do, mostly around privacy and confidentiality, and how we can link them to other services. From this, I guess this is where the idea of actual carer participation came. We thought, okay, we're going to do this sheet. We don't really know what we should put on there. Let's go ask the carers. So essentially that looked like consultation of what should be on this sheet. And that was, this was via the people in the carers working group, some of the support workers actually reaching out to carers for little interviews, I guess, and feedback. So the consultation, and then once we had a draft together, we got them to review what the sheet was going to look like. And Bronze, yep, I'm running out of time. I'll zip through, and then some feedback on the language. This is sort of, this again, you can't read it, it's a bit small, but that's what it looked like. And then we thought, okay, that was a good example of some care participation. From here, we want to move into deeper care participation. So moving through those spheres of influence, getting up, reviewing what spheres of influence carers can have, and in our case, it's organisational. Moving along that engagement spectrum from just informing them through to involving, collaborating, and ultimately empowering them to direct how the service looks. Keeping the working group going and involving them in a service evaluation. I think that's it. So nice and speedy, but an example of how services out there, mental health specifically, that aren't carer services are trying to involve carers a bit more. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. It's great to hear what Nimai's doing in that sphere, and I think we're seeing more and more of carer participation in services, and certainly in line with the Royal Commission findings, we're going to see more carer lived experience leadership, eh, Tom? Yeah, raising up our carers into leadership.
Yeah, absolutely.
Supporting them, yeah.
Ideally, yeah.
So it's great. We've heard from so many folk around how we can really promote the carer voice in this second section of our event today. So, Belle.
Yes, thank you, Bronwyn. Yes, very informative. I suppose what stood out for me today is the support, the care for the carers on their ongoing journey, and that self-care is the most important to their well-being.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And one of the things that stood out to me today was that importance of the need for co-regulation to support self-regulation and to keep our trauma-informed response. And just that skill of taking care of ourselves so that we can be a safe container and a compassionate witness, as Jen has rightly pointed out today. We started with the challenges for carers, then we heard about how we can support people who've been through trauma, including ourselves. We've learned a whole range of carer resources and various carer supports, and we've heard about how carers can be involved in developing and informing support services. In your booklet today, you will have some links to the various peak bodies and important carer resource links. It's not exhaustive, and actually I've just had someone send me the Carers Recognition Act 2012. So if you haven't made yourself aware of that, please do. It's a very important act in relation to carers, which we didn't cover today. Apologies. So just please take a moment now to complete the feedback survey in Slido. It's very important that we have all your feedback, and that's activated now. Belle.
Thank you to all the presenters and event crew. Here is a list of those involved in providing this webinar today. Thanks also to all our participants who have offered so much to the learnings for everyone.
Yes, and please see the Emska webpage located on the Eastern Melbourne PHN website for a range of navigation resources, information about events and other useful tools. We'll see you again in November for our next Emska workshop, Mental Health and Co-occurring Issues Explored, which will occur in a Zoom format. And that's all for now. Thank you, Belle.
Thank you, Bronwyn.
Bye.